The Secrets of the Heart. Selected works. By Kahlil Gibran. Translated from the Arabic. By Anthony Riscala Ferris. By the same author. Tears and Laughter. Spirits Rebellious. Both translated from the Arabic by Anthony R. Ferris. Editor's Preface. Parse the same fascinating style of his now famous Tears and Laughter and Spirits Rebel. Lias, Kahlil Gibran conveys a strong and beautiful message in this, another of his earlier works. The very heart of the mystic East emerges in this volume, and from the outset one feels the tremendous mood, the electrifying boldness, the terrible magnetism of the immortal Gibran. This ancient wisdom, set forth in the form of a simple yet profound philosophy of life, applies dynamically and with amazing timeliness to present and human problems. But for all of his preoccupation with momentous subjects, Gibran is far from the modern school of poetry, and his style inclines to Victorian lyricism when not catapulting toward Dante or Goethe. It is at the same time powerful and tender, frightening and delightful, joyous and funereal, simple and tremendous. However, diametric opposites in substance appear. 7. Ently presented no difficulty in style to this master of simple, effective communication of subtle thought. Gibran's style is incomparable in both poetry and prose, and his prose carries a lyric beauty rich in magnificent simplicity, the simplicity which Gibran continually sought as the identifying characteristic of true beauty in any form. Yet, in employing the soft phraseology of the Psalms, he nevertheless releases an unrestrained vituperation when execrating the usurpation of human rights by tyrannical church and state officials. It was of little surprise or importance to Gibran's multitude of followers that he was exiled from his country and excommunicated from his church in consequence of his fearless, knife-edged attacks. Indicative of his literary artistry, the flowing beauty of his lyrics does not palliate the strength of his indictments, nor does his bitterness invade the exquisite delicacy of his lacy poetry, which has an appeal comparable to that of rich music. Although these atmospheric writings appear to be autobiographical in nature, they clearly reveal Kahlil Gibran as a prophet of penetrating vision and objective understanding. This seer warns ominously of the grave and unseen dangers yet to befall this world on its stony path of intrigue, maladjustment, and border consciousness. His clarity of perception is not confined to recognition and condemnation alone, but with a sincere constructive purpose motivated by his intense artist's faith in ultimate perfection. He offers strikingly logical methods for curing the gaping wounds in the side of society. His warnings are neither crusades nor preachments, yet his thoughts are conveyed completely, clearly, powerfully. He muses over the beautiful, not the ugly, and his criticisms are heavily imbued with a gentle melancholy. All, however, are subordinated to his magnificent descriptive powers, abounding with fine metaphorical terseness. On the ecclesiastical side, he displays a brilliance of spiritual insight and a determination of dedication that persist and probe until they pierce the outer self. His millions of followers in dozens of 1x languages absorb Gibran's writings practically as religious devotions, and his excommunication served to fortify and augment his literary parish. His views of the church are more denunciatory than complimentary, but his love for its teachings and his fury over its methods are sharply defined. and bespeak no ambiguity or paradox in his meaning. The book burners and clergy lived to rue their acts, and shortly before his death in 1931 perhaps when he was too weak to resist Gibran submitted to the uninvited overtures of the church to reclaim him after the hasty excommunication. Despite the fact that the beloved master brought down the unconcealed wrath of religious and state authorities, any apology on his part was of little concern to him, for he had long since reached a spiritual plane far above petty rote, law, and doctrine. Gibran's doctrine is of kindness, of brotherhood, and of charity, and he requires but few words to transmit great thoughts. On charity he discloses X. I sing the praise of my home and long to see again my birthplace, but if it refused shelter and food to the needy wayfarer, I would, in my inner voice, convert my praise into eulogy, and my longing into forgetfulness. And again, remember, my brother, that the coin which you drop into the withered hand stretching toward you is the only golden chain that binds your rich heart to the loving heart of God. On brotherhood, love is stronger than death, and death is stronger than life. It is sad that men divide amongst themselves. He adds, humanity is the spirit of the Supreme Being on earth. And humanity is standing amidst unseen ruins, hiding its nakedness behind tattered rags, shedding tears upon hollow cheeks, calling for its children in pitiful voice. But the children are busy singing the anthem, they are busy sharpening the swords and cannot hear the cries of their mothers. Small wonder that the present world gives heed to Gibran in its acute difficulty. His thoughts are ageless, and the real, the essential Gibran will live on and grow through the centuries. He attacks without reservation hypocrisy in any form. Illustrative of his thoughts is the stinging reproach found in The Crucified, written on Good Friday. On this one day of each year, the philosophers leave their dark caves, and the thinkers their cold cells, and the poets their imaginary arbors, and all stand reverently upon that slant mountain, listening to the voice of a young man saying of his tormentors and his killers, O Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. But as dark silence chokes the voices of light, the philosophers and the thinkers and the poets return to their narrow crevices and shroud their souls with meaningless pages of parchment. The women who busy themselves with the splendor of life will bestir themselves today from their cushions to see the sorrowful woman standing before the cross, washing with her tears the blood stains from the feet of a holy man suspended between heaven and earth, and when their shallow eyes weary of the scene they will depart and soon laugh. The torrent shall sweep away all things not fastened to strength. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Gibran was young at the time of these writings, but he exhibits a ripe and mature grasp on a subject that has intrigued and baffled man from the beginning, his destiny, and the why of his being. His youth renders all the more remarkable his unquestioned mastery of symbolism and sparkling in profusion throughout Secrets of the Heart. His sympathetic approach to the prospect of death likewise belongs to the aged, but a knowledge of Gibran's love for tears, which sear and purify the soul, and his affection for fellow sufferers, offer understanding of his philosophically pleasant contemplations of death. Generally, Gibran's depth establishes itself at a level of complete lucidity to all who endeavor to find it, and his frequent meanderings into the field of mysticism supplement with spiritual argument the precepts of his earthly discourse. His Blending of Oriental and Occidental philosophy is occasionally disconcerting to the Western mind. One has the feeling that the emotions expressed so plainly were too large for words, and were wrenched from him reluctantly through his soul's compulsion. One cannot fail to recognize in Kahlil Gibran the sincere expression of a passionate urge to improve the lot of suffering, exploited human ity, an impulse that fired his mind and heart from X11 childhood. It is a message, moreover, that emanates from painful knowledge of man's inhumanity. To man, drawn from a poignant memory of what his eyes had seen and his ears had heard in his close observance of the perpetual human tragedy, he conveys his sense of sorrow for the cruel waste of beauty and talent and sensitivity implicit in the neglect and degradation of the millions throughout the Near East. But far more than local evils and the abuse of power by Eastern regimes is woven into the living fabric of Gibran's artistry, with the moving intensity that characterizes truly significant utterance, his earliest like his latest writings. Project Timeless, Universal Truths. Essentially they are the same truths that were first voiced in the Syrian land by Jesus when he spoke to the faith full along river banks and from hilltops familiar to Gibran's boyhood. And they, too, are presented in the delightful literary form of the parable, peculiarly a heritage of the venerable Aramaic tradition. Any endeavor to categorize these writings, or to 14. Establish a source of influence, can result only in utter despair, for they are as strange as they are beautiful. In them are found the strength of Voltaire, the lavish beauty of King Lexiathan, the sadness of Chateaubriand's itinéraire for Jerusalem, the theme and locale of Lamartine's voyage en Orient and Histoire de la Turquie, and the mysticism of a metaphysical Jeffreys or Hudson. Gibran blazes forth from the summit of all that is best in genuine Sufi literature. His sentiments herein give new force to his other great works, for all possess the power and effectiveness of his one enormous theme. They stress the generally understood, yet completely ignored fact that but few things in life have real importance. Again and again this prophet reminds us that if human relationships are wrong, no other factors of life can really matter. For what power, or wealth, or prestige can compensate for the silent agony of the heart's bereavement? In what fashion can existence on earth be fulfilled when love departs or friendship withers? The bonds of a common brotherhood without demarcation, no less 15. Than personal and family ties, must be strength. And if, individually and collectively, we are to meet competently the challenge of progress or of survival, Gibran drives these teachings forcefully to the heart, and they persist in agitating the heart to complete accord. Like Beethoven's deathless sick, of which the composer said, from the heart it has sprung and to the heart it shall penetrate. This Lebanese savant, through his rich sincerity reaches the deepest recesses of our emotional and spiritual awareness. Martin L. War. New York City. 1947. To Ruth. This book, born of the blue dawn of endeavor, and all things of substance not fashioned of the living breath of Almighty God, are but naught when viewed with her, whose spiritual inspiration and exalting guidance are as the pure and loving hands of eternal beauty. Contents. Editor's Preface. The Tempest. Slavery. Satan. The Mermaids. Weaned You. The Poet. Ashes of the Ages and Eternal Fire. Between night and morn. The secrets of the heart. My countrymen. John the madman. The enchanting houri. Behind the garment. Dead are my people. The ambitious violet. The crucified. 7. 27. 35. 61. 67. 77. 85. 107. I 131. 143. 171. 179. 187. 199. 209. Eventide of the feast. The grave digger. Honeyed poison. Iram, the city of lofty pillars. The day of my birth. Contemplations in sadness. The cortege. 219. 229. 237. 247. 289. 305. 313. The Tempest. The Tempest. Part I. Yastra X Factured was 30 years of age when he withdrew himself from society and departed to live in an isolated hermitage in the vicinity of Kadisha Valley in North Lebanon. The people of the nearby villages heard various tales concerning Yusuf. Some related that his was a wealthy and noble family, and that he loved a woman who betrayed him and caused him to lead a solitary life, while others said that he was a poet who deserted the clamorous city and retired to that place in order to record his thoughts and compose his inspiration, and many were sure that he was a mystic who was contented with the spiritual world, although most people insisted that he was a madman. As for myself, I could not draw any conclusion. 3. Regarding the man, for I knew that there must be a deep secret within his heart whose revelation I would not trust to mere speculation. I had long hoped for the opportunity to meet this strange man. I had endeavored in devious ways to win his friendship in order to study his reality and learn his story by inquiring as to his purpose in life, but my efforts were in vain. When I met him for the first time, he was walking by the forest of the holy cedars of Lebanon, and I greeted him with the finest choice of words, but he returned my greeting by merely shaking his head and striding off. On another occasion I found him standing in the midst of a small vineyard by a monastery, and again I approached and greeted him, saying, "It is said by the villagers that this monastery was built by a Syriac group in the 14th century. Do you know anything of its history?" He replied coldly, "I do not know who built this monastery. Nor do I care to know." And he turned his back to me and added, "Why do you not ask your grandparents, who are older than I, and who know 4. more of the history of these valleys than I do?" Realizing at once my utter failure, I left him. Thus did 2 years pass, and the bizarre life of this strange man preyed on my mind and disturbed my dreams. Part 2. One day in autumn, as I was roaming the hills and knolls adjacent to the hermitage of Yusuf el-Fakri, I was suddenly caught in a strong wind and torrent rain, and the tempest cast me here and there like a boat whose rudder has been broken, and whose masts have been torn by a gale in a rough sea. I directed my steps with difficulty to ward Yusuf's place, saying to myself, "This is an opportunity one have long sought, and the tempest will be my excuse for entering, while my wet clothes will serve as good reason for lingering." I was in a miserable plight when I reached the hermitage, and as I knocked on the door, the man whom I had been longing to see opened it. He was holding in one hand a dying bird whose 5. head had been injured and whose wings had been broken. I greeted him saying, "I beg your forgiveness for this annoying intrusion. The raging tempest trapped me while I was afar from home." He frowned, saying, "There are many caves in this wilderness in which you might have taken refuge." However, he did not close the door, and the beat of my heart quickened in anticipation. For the realization of my great wish was close at hand. He commenced to touch the bird's head, gently and with the utmost care and interest, exhibiting a quality important to my heart. I was surprised over the two opponent characteristics found in that man: mercy and cruelty at the same time. We became aware of the strained silence. He resented my presence, I desired to remain. It seemed as if he felt my thought, for he looked up and said, "The tempest is clean, and declines to eat soured meat. Why do you seek to escape from it?" And with a touch of humor, I responded, "The tempest may not desire salted or soured things, but she is inclined to chill and tender all things, and undoubtedly she would 6. enjoy consuming me if she grasped me again." His expression was severe when he retorted, "The tempest would have bestowed upon you a great honor, of which you are not worthy, if she had swallowed you." I agreed, "Yes, sir, I fled the tempest so I might not be awarded an honor which I do not merit." He turned his face from me in an effort to choke his smile, and then motioned toward a wooden bench by the fire place and invited me to rest and dry my raiment. I could scarcely control my elation. I thanked him and sat down while he seated himself opposite, on a bench carved of rock. He commenced to dip his fingertips into an earthen ware jar containing a kind of oil, applying it softly to the bird's head and wings. Without looking up, he said, "The strong winds have caused this bird to fall upon the rocks between life and death." I replied, rendering comparison, "And the strong winds have sent me, adrift, to your door, in time to prevent having my head injured and my wings broken." He looked at me seriously and said, "It is my 7. wish that man would show the bird's instinct, and it is my wish that the tempest would break the people's wings. For man inclines toward fear and cowardice, and as he feels the awakening of the tempest he crawls into the crevices and the caves of the earth and hides himself." My purpose was to extract the story of his self-imposed exile, and I provoked, "Yes, the birds possess an honor and courage that man does not possess. Man lives in the shadow of laws and customs which he made and fashioned for himself, but the birds live according to the same free, eternal law which causes the earth to pursue its mighty path about the sun." His eyes and face brightened, as if he had found in me an understanding disciple, and he exclaimed, "Well done. If you place belief in your own words you should leave civilization and its corrupt laws and traditions, and live like the birds in a place empty of all things except the magnificent law of heaven and earth. Believing is a fine thing, but placing those beliefs into execution is a test of strength. Many are 8. those who talk like the roar of the sea, but their lives are shallow and stagnant, like the rotting marshes. Many are those who lift their heads above the mountain tops, but their spirits remain dormant in the obscurity of the caverns." He rose, trembling from his seat, and placed the bird upon a folded cloth by the window. He placed a bundle of dry sticks upon the fire, saying, remove your sandals and warm your feet. For dampness is dangerous to man's health. Dry well your garments, and be comfortable. Yusuf's continued hospitality kept my hopes high. I approached near to the fire, and the steam sifted from my wet robe. While he stood at the door gazing at the gray skies, my mind surged and scurried for the opening wedge into his back ground. I asked, innocently, has it been long since you came to this place? Without looking at me, he answered quietly, I came to this place when the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. I was aghast at these words. Struggling to gather my shocked and scattered wits, I said to myself, how fantastic this man is, and how difficult is the path that leads to his reality. But I shall attack cautiously and slowly and patiently, until his reticence turns into communication, and his strangeness into understanding. Part I. Night was spreading her black garment upon those valleys, and the tempest was shrieking dizzily, and the rain becoming stronger. I began to fancy that the biblical flood was coming again, to abolish life and wash man's filth from God's earth. It seemed that the revolution of elements had created in Yusuf's heart a tranquility which often comes as a reaction to temperament and converts aloneness into conviviality. He ignited 2 candles, and then placed before me a jar of wine and a large tray containing bread, cheese, olives, honey, and some dry fruits. Then he sat near me, and 10. After apologizing for the small quantity but not for the simplicity of the food, asked me to join him. We partook of the repast in understanding silence, listening to the wailing of the wind and the crying of the rain, and at the same time I was contemplating his face and trying to dig out his secrets, meditating the possible motive underlying his unusual existence. Having finished, he took a copper kettle from the fire and poured pure, aromatic coffee into 2 cups, then he opened a small box and offered me a cigarette, addressing me as brother. I took one while drinking my coffee, not believing what my eyes were seeing. He looked at me smilingly, and after he had inhaled deeply of his cigarette and sipped some coffee, he said, undoubtedly you are thinking upon the existence here of wine and tobacco and coffee, and you may also be wondering over my food and comforts. Your curiosity is justified in all respects, for you are one of the many who believe that in being away from the people, one is absent from life, and must abstain from all its enjoyment. Quickly I agreed, yes, it is related by the wise men that he who deserts the world for the purpose of worshipping God alone will leave behind all the enjoyment and plenty of life, contenting himself with the simple products of God alone, and existing on plants and water. After a pause, heavy with thought, he mused, I could have worshipped God while living among his creatures, for worship does not require solitude. I did not leave the people in order to see God, for I had always seen him at the home of my father and mother. I deserted the people because their natures were in conflict with mine, and their dreams did not agree with my dreams. I left man because I found that the will of my soul was turning one way and grinding harshly against the wheels of other souls which were turning in the opposite direction. I left civilization because I found it to be an old and corrupt tree, strong and terrible, whose roots are locked into the obscurity of the earth, and whose branches are reaching beyond the cloud, but its blossoms are of greed and evil and crime, and its fruit is I too of woe and misery and fear. Crusaders have undertaken to blend good into it and change its nature, but they could not succeed. They died disappointed, persecuted, and torn. Yusuf leaned toward the side of the fireplace as if awaiting the impression of his words upon my heart. I thought it best to remain a listener, and he continued, "No, I did not seek solitude to pray and lead a hermit's life. For prayer, which is the song of the heart, will reach the ears of God, even when mingled with the shout and cry of thousands of voices. To live the life of a recluse is to torture the body and soul and deaden the inclinations, a kind of existence which is repugnant to me, for God has erected the bodies as temples for the spirits, and it is our mission to deserve and maintain the trust reposed in us by God. No, my brother, I did not seek solitude for religious purposes, but solely to avoid the people and their laws, their teachings, and their traditions, their ideas, and their clamor and their wailing." 13. I sought solitude in order to keep from seeing the faces of men who sell themselves and buy with the same price that which is lower than they are, spiritually and materially. T sought solitude in order that I might not encounter the women who walk proudly, with 1,000 smiles upon their lips, while in the depths of their thousands of hearts there is but one purpose. I sought solitude in order to conceal myself from those self-satisfied individuals who see the specter of knowledge in their dreams and believe that they have attained their goal. I fled from society to avoid those who see but the phantom of truth in their awakening, and shout to the world that they have acquired completely the essence of truth. T deserted the world and sought solitude because I became tired of rendering courtesy to those multitudes who believe that humility is a sort of weakness, and mercy a kind of cowardice, and snobbery a form of strength. I sought solitude because my soul wearied of 14. Association with those who believe sincerely that the sun and moon and stars do not rise save from their coffers, and do not set except in their gardens. I ran from the office seekers who shatter the earthly fate of the people while throwing into their eyes the golden dust and filling their ears with sounds of meaningless talk. I departed from the ministers who do not live according to their sermons, and who demand of the people that which they do not solicit of themselves. I sought solitude because I never obtained kindness from a human unless I paid the full price with my heart. I sought solitude because I loathed that great and terrible institution which the people call civilization, that symmetrical monstrosity erected upon the perpetual misery of humankind's. T sought solitude, for in it there is a full life, for the spirit and for the heart and for the body. I found the endless prairies where the light of the sun rests, and where the flowers breathe their fragrance into space, and where the streams sing their way to the sea. I discovered the mountains where I found the fresh awakening of spring, and the colorful longing of summer, and the rich songs of autumn, and the beautiful mystery of winter. I came to this far corner of God's domain, for I hungered to learn the secrets of the universe, and approach close to the throne of God. Yusuf breathed deeply, as if he had been relieved of a heavy burden. His eyes shone with strange and magical rays, and upon his radiant face appeared the signs of pride, will, and contentment. A few minutes passed, and I was gazing idly at him, and pondering the unveiling of what had been hidden from me, then I addressed him, saying, "You are undoubtedly correct in most of the things you have said, but through your diagnosis of the social ailment, you prove at the same time that you are a good doctor. I believe that the sick society is in dire need of such a physician." 16. Who should cure it or kill it? This distressed world begs your attention. Is it just or merciful to withdraw yourself from the ailing patient and deny him your benefit? He stared at me thoughtfully, and then said, "With futility, since the beginning of the world, the doctors have been trying to save the people from their disorders. Some used knives, while others used potions, but pestilence spread hope. Leslie, it is my wish that the patient would content himself with remaining in his filthy bed, meditating his long-continued sores, but instead, he stretches his hands from under the robe and clutches at the neck of each who comes to visit him, choking him to death. What irony it is! The evil patient kills the doctor, and then closes his eyes and says within himself, 'He was a great physician.' No, brother, no one on earth can benefit humanity. The sower, however wise and expert he may be, cannot cause the field to sprout in winter." And I argued, the people's winter will pass away, and then comes the beautiful spring, and 17. The flowers must surely bloom in the fields, and the brooks will again leap in the valleys. He frowned, and said bitterly, "Alas! Has God divided man's life, which is the whole creation, into seasons like those of the year? Will any tribe of human beings, living now in God's truth and spirit, desire to reappear on the face of this earth? Will ever the time come when man settles and abides at the right arm of life, rejoicing with the brilliant light of day and the peaceful silence of night? Can that dream become reality? Can it materialize after the earth has been covered with human flesh and drenched with man's blood?" And Yusuf stood and raised his hand toward the sky, as if pointing at a different world, and he continued, "This is naught but a vain dream for the world, but I am finding its accomplishment for myself, and what I am discovering here occupies every space in my heart and in the valleys and in the mountains." He now raised his intense voice. "What I really know to be true is the crying of my inner self. I am here living, and in the depths 18. of my existence there is a thirst and hunger, and I find joy in partaking of the bread and wine of life from the vases which I make and fashion by my own hands. For this reason I abandoned the boards of the people and came to this place, and I shall remain here until the ending." He continued walking back and forth across the room in agitation while I was pondering his sayings and meditating the description of society's gaping wounds. I ventured again a tactful criticism. "I hold the utmost regard for your opinion and intentions, and I envy and respect your solitude and aloneness, but I know that this miserable nation has sustained a great loss in your expatriation, for she is in need of an understanding healer to help her through her difficulties and awaken her spirit." He shook his head slowly and said, "This nation is like all the nations, and the people are made of the same element and do not vary except in their exterior appearance, which is of no consequence. The misery of our Oriental nations is the misery of the world, and what you call civilization. 19. In the West is naught but another spectre of the uncanny phantoms of tragic deception. Hypocrisy will always remain, even if her fin Ger tips are colored and polished, and deceit will never change even if her touch becomes soft and delicate, and falsehood will never turn into truth even if you dress her with silken robes and place her in the palace, and greed will not become contentment, nor will crime become Tuesday. And eternal slavery to teachings, to customs, and to history will remain slavery even if she paints her face and disguises her voice. Slavery will remain slavery in all her horrible form, even if she calls herself liberty. No, my brother, the West is not higher than the East, nor is the West lower than the East, and the difference that stands between the two is not greater than the difference between the tiger and the lion. There is a just and perfect law that I have found behind the exterior of society, which equalizes misery, prosperity, and ignorance. It does not prefer one nation to another, nor does it oppress one tribe in order to enrich another. 20. I exclaimed, then civilization is vanity, and all in it is vanity. He quickly responded, yes. Civilization is vanity and all in it is vanity. Inventions and discoveries are but amusement and comfort for the body when it is tired and weary. The conquest of distance and the victory over the seas are but false fruit which do not satisfy the soul, nor nourish the heart, neither lift the spirit. For they are afar from nature. And those structures and theories which man calls knowledge and art are naught except shackles and golden chains which man drags, and he rejoices with their glittering reflections and ringing sounds. They are strong cages whose bars man commenced fabricating ages ago, unaware that he was building from the inside, and that he would soon become his own prisoner to eternity. Yes, vain are the deeds of man, and vain are his purposes, and all is vanity upon this earth. He paused, then slowly added, and among all vanities of life, there is only one thing that the spirit loves and craves. One thing dazzling and alone. What is it? I inquired with quivering voice. 21. He looked at me for a long minute and then closed his eyes. He placed his hands on his chest, while his face brightened, and with a serene and sincere voice he said, "It is an awakening in the spirit, it is an awakening in the inner depths of the heart. It is an overwhelming and magnificent power that descends suddenly upon man's conscience and opens his eyes, whereupon he sees life amid a dizzying shower of brilliant music, surrounded by a circle of great light, with man standing as a pillar of beauty between the earth and the firmament. It is a fame that suddenly rages within the spirit and sears and purifies the heart, ascending above the earth and hovering in the spacious sky. It is a kindness that envelopes the individual's heart whereby he would bewilder and disapprove all who opposed it, and revolt against those who refuse to understand its great meaning. It is a secret hand which removed the veil from my eyes, while I was a member of society amidst my family, my friends and my countrymen. Many times I wondered, and spoke to myself, saying, what is this universe, and why am I 22. Different from those people who are looking at me? And how do I know them, and where did I meet them, and why am I living among them? Am I a stranger among them, or is it they who are strange to this earth, built by life who entrusted me with the keys? He suddenly became silent, as if remembering something he had seen long before, refusing to reveal it. Then he stretched his arms forward and whispered, that is what happened to me 4 years ago, when I left the world and came to this void place to live in the awakeness of life and Enjoy kind thoughts and beautiful silence. He walked toward the door, looking at the depths of the darkness as if preparing to address the tempest. But he spoke in a vibrating voice, saying, "It is an awakening within the spirit. He who knows it, is unable to reveal it by words. And he who knows it not, will never think upon the compelling and beautiful mystery of exist." Pt. Ins. 23. Part 4. An hour had passed and Yusuf el-Fakri was striding about the room, stopping at random and gazing at the tremendous grey skies. I remained silent, reflecting upon the strange unison of joy and sorrow in his solitary life. Later in the night he approached me and stared long into my face, as if wanting to commit to memory the picture of the man to whom he had disclosed the piercing secrets of his life. My mind was heavy with turmoil, my eyes with mist. He said quietly, "I am going now to walk through the night with the tempest, to feel the closeness of nature's expression. It is a practice that I enjoy greatly in autumn and winter. Here is the wine. And there is the tobacco. Please accept my home as your own for the night." He wrapped himself in a black robe and added smilingly, "I beg you to fasten the door against the intruding humans when you leave in the morning, for I plan to spend the day in the forest of the holy cedars." Then he walked toward the 24 door, carrying a long walking staff, and he concluded, "If the tempest surprises you again while you are in this vicinity, do not hesitate to take refuge in this hermitage. I hope you will teach yourself to love, and not to fear, the tempest. Good night, my brother." He opened the door and walked out with his head high, into the dark. I stood at the door to see which course he had taken, but he had disappeared from view. For a few minutes I heard the fall of his feet upon the broken stones of the valley. Part B. Morning came, after a night of deep thought. And the tempest had passed away, while the sky was clear and the mountains and the plains were reveling in the sun's warm rays. On my way back to the city I felt that spiritual awakening of which Yusuf el-Fakri had spoken, and it was raging throughout every fiber of my being. I felt that my shivering must be visible. And when I calmed, all about me was beauty and perfection. 25. As soon as I reached the noisome people and heard their voices and saw their deeds, I stopped and said within myself, "Yes, the spiritual awakening is the most essential thing in man's life, and it is the sole purpose of being. Is not civilization, in all its tragic forms, a supreme motive for spirit awakening? Then how can we deny existing matter, while its very existence is unwavering proof of its conformability into the intended fitness? The present civilization may possess a vanishing purpose, but the eternal law has offered to that purpose a ladder whose steps can lead to a free substance. I never saw Yusuf el-Fakri again, for through my endeavors to attend the ills of civilization, life had expelled me from North Lebanon in late autumn of that same year, and I was required to live in exile in a distant country whose tempests are domestic. And leading a hermit's life in that country is a sort of glorious madness, for its society, too, is ailing. 26. Slavery. Slavery. People are the slaves of life, and it is slavery which fills their days with misery and distress, and floods their nights with tears and anguish. 7,000 years have passed since the day of my first birth, and since that day I have been witnessing the slaves of life, dragging their heavy Shackles. I have roamed the east and west of the earth, and wandered in the light and in the shadow of life. I have seen the processions of civilization, moving from light into darkness, and each was dragged down to hell by humiliated souls bent under the yoke of slavery. The strong is fettered and subdued, and the faithful is on his knees shipping before the idols. I have followed man from Babylon to Cairo, and from Andur to Baghdad, and observed the marks of his chains upon the sand. I heard the sad echoes of the fickle 29 ages repeated by the eternal prairies and valleys. I visited the temples and altars and entered the palaces, and sat before the thrones. And I saw the apprentice slaving for the artisan, and the artisan slaving for the employer, and the employer slaving for the soldier, and the soldier slaving for the governor, and the governor slaving for the king, and the king slaving for the priest, and the priest slaving for the idol. And the idol is naught but earth fashioned by Satan and erected upon a knoll of skulls. I entered the mansions of the rich and visited the huts of the poor. I found the infant nursing the milk of slavery from his mother's bosom, and the children learning submission with the alphabet. The maidens wear garments of restriction and passivity, and the wives retire with tears upon beds of obedience and legal compliance. I accompanied the ages from the banks of the Kanga to the shores of Euphrates, from the mouth of the Nile to the plains of Assyria, from the 30 arenas of Athens to the churches of Rome, from the slums of Constantinople to the palaces of Alexandria. Yet I saw slavery moving over all in a glorious and majestic procession of ignorance. I saw the people sacrificing the youths and maidens at the feet of the idol, calling her the god, pouring wine and perfume upon her feet, and calling her the queen, burning incense before her image, and calling her the prophet, kneeling and worshipping before her, and calling her the law, fighting and dying for her, and calling her patriotism, submitting to her will, and calling her the shadow of God on earth, destroying and demolishing homes and institutions for her sake, and calling her fraternity, struggling and stealing and working for her, and calling her fortune and happiness, killing for her, and calling her equality. She possesses various names, but one reality. She has many appearances, but is made of one element. In truth, she is an everlasting ailment bequeathed by each generation unto its successor. ****** yen. I found the blind slavery, which ties the PEOPLEs present with their parents past, and urges them to yield to their traditions and customs, placing ancient spirits in the new bodies. I found the mute slavery, which binds the life of a man to a wife whom he abhors, and places the woman's body in the bed of a hated husband, deadening both lives spiritually. I found the deaf slavery, which stifles the soul and the heart, rendering man but an empty echo of a voice, and a pitiful shadow of a body. I found the lame slavery, which places man's neck under the domination of the tyrant and submits strong bodies and weak minds to the sons of greed for use as instruments to their power. I found the ugly slavery, which descends with the infant spirits from the spacious firmament into the home of misery, where need lives by ignorance, and humiliation resides beside the spare. And the children grow as miserable, and live as criminals, and die as despised and rejected non-existence. I found the subtle slavery, which entitles things 32 with other than their names, calling slyness an intelligence, and emptiness a knowledge, and weakness a tenderness, and cowardice a strong refusal. I found a twisted slavery, which causes the tongues of the weak to move with fear, and speak outside of their feelings, and they feign to be meditating their plight, but they become as empty sacks, which even a child can fold or hang. I found a bent slavery, which prevails upon one nation to comply with the laws and rules of another nation, and the bending is greater with each day. I found the perpetual slavery, which crowns the sons of monarchs as kings, and offers no regard to merit. I found the black slavery, which brands with shame and disgrace forever the innocent sons of the criminals. Contemplating slavery, it is found to possess the vicious powers of continuation and contagion. 33. When I grew tired of following the dissolute ages, and wearied of beholding the processions of stoned people, I walked lonely in the valley of the shadow of life, where the past attempts to conceal itself in guilt, and the soul of the future folds and rests itself too long. There, at the edge of blood and tears river, which crawled like a poisonous viper and twisted like a criminal's dreams, I listened to the frightened whisper of the ghosts of slaves, and gazed at nothingness. When midnight came and the spirits emerged from hidden places, I saw a cadaverous, dying spectre fall to her knees, gazing at the moon. I approached her, asking, "What is your name?" "My name is Liberty," replied this ghastly shadow of a corpse. And I inquired, "Where are your children?" And Liberty, tearful and weak, gasped, "One died crucified, another died mad, and the third one is not yet born." She limped away and spoke further, but the mist in my eyes and cries of my heart prevented sight or hearing. 34. Satan. Satan. People looked upon Father Simon as their guide in the field of spiritual and theological matters, for he was an authority and a source of deep information on venial and mortal sins, well versed in the secrets of paradise, hell, and purgatory. Father Simon's mission in North Lebanon was to travel from one village to another, preaching and curing the people from the spiritual disease of sin, and saving them from the horrible trap of Satan. The Reverend Father waged constant war with Satan. The Fellaheen honored and respected this clergyman, and were always anxious to buy his advice or prayers with pieces of gold and silver, and at every harvest they would present him with the finest fruits of their fields. One evening in autumn, as Father Simon walked his way toward a solitary village, cross 37. In those valleys and hills, he heard a painful cry emerging from a ditch at the side of the road. He stopped and looked in the direction of the voice, and saw an unclothed man lying on the ground. Streams of blood oozed from deep wounds in his head and chest. He was moaning pitifully for aid, saying, "Save me, help me. Have mercy on me. I am dying." Father Simon looked with perplexity at the sufferer, and said within himself, "This man must be a thief. He probably tried to rob the wayfarers and failed. Someone has wounded him, and I fear that should he die I may be accused of having taken his life." Having thus pondered the situation, he resumed his journey, whereupon the dying man stopped him, calling out, "Do not leave me. I am dying." Then the father meditated again, and his face became pale as he realized he was refusing to help. His lips quivered, but he spoke to himself, saying, "He must surely be one of the madmen one daring in the wilderness. The sight of his wounds brings fear into my heart. What shall I do? Surely a spiritual doctor is not capable of treating flesh. 38. Wounded bodies. Father Saman walked ahead a few paces when the near corpse uttered a painful plaint that melted the heart of the rock, and he gasped, "Come close to me. Come, for we have been friends a long time. You are Father Saman, the good shepherd, and I am not a thief nor a madman. Come close, and do not let me die in this deserted place. Come, and will tell you who I am." Father Saman came close to the man, knelt, and stared at him, but he saw a strange face with contrasting features. He saw intelligence with slyness, ugliness with beauty, and wickedness with softness. He withdrew to his feet sharply, and exclaimed, "Who are you?" With a fainting voice, the dying man said, "Fear me not, Father, for we have been strong friends for long. Help me to stand, and take me to the nearby streamlet and cleanse my wounds with your linens." And the father inquired, "Tell me who you are, for I do not know you, nor even remember having seen you." And the man replied with an agonizing voice. 39. You know my identity. You have seen me 1,000 times and you speak of me each day. I am dearer to you than your own life. And the father reprimanded, "You are a lying impostor. A dying man should tell the truth. I have never seen your evil face in my entire life. Tell me who you are, or I will suffer you to die soaked in your own escaping life." And the wounded man moved slowly and looked into the clergyman's eyes, and upon his lips appeared a mystic smile, and in a quiet, deep, and smooth voice he said, "I am Satan." Upon hearing the fearful word, Father Saman uttered a terrible cry that shook the far corners of the valley. Then he stared, and realized that the dying man's body, with its grotesque distortions, coincided with the likeness of Satan in a religious picture hanging on the wall of the village church. He trembled and cried out, saying, "God has shown me your hellish image and justly caused me to hate you. Cursed be you forevermore. The mangled lamb must be destroyed by the shepherd, lest he will infect the other lambs." 40. Satan answered, "Be not in haste, Father, and lose not this fleeting time in empty talk. Come and close my wounds quickly, before life departs from my body." And the clergyman retorted, "The hands which offer a daily sacrifice to God shall not touch a body made of the secretion of hell. You must die accursed by the tongues of the ages, and the lips of human ity, for you are the enemy of humanity. And it is your avowed purpose to destroy all virtue." Satan moved in anguish, raising himself upon one elbow, and responded, "You know not what you are saying, nor understand the crime you are committing upon yourself. Give heed, for I will relate my story. Today I walked alone in this solitary valley. When I reached this place, a group of angels descended to attack, and struck me severely. Had it not been for one of them, who carried a blazing sword with 2 sharp edges, I would have driven them off, but I had no power against the brilliant sword." And Satan ceased talking for a moment, as he pressed a shaking 41. hand upon a deep wound in his side. Then he continued, "The armed angel I believe he was. Michael was an expert gladiator. Had I not thrown myself to the friendly ground and feigned to have been slain, he would have torn me into Brutal death. With voice of triumph, and casting his eyes heavenward, the Father offered, blessed be Michael's name, who has saved humanity from this vicious enemy. And Satan protested, my disdain for human ity is not greater than your hatred for yourself. You are blessing Michael who never has come to your rescue. You are cursing me in the hour of my defeat, even though I was, and still am, the source of your tranquility and happiness. You deny me your blessing, and extend not your kindness, but you live and prosper in the shadow of my being. You have adopted for my existence an excuse and weapon for your career, and you employ my name in justification for your deeds. Has not my past caused you to be in need of my present and future? Have you 42. Reached your goal in amassing the required wealth? Have you found it impossible to extract more gold and silver from your followers, using my kingdom as a threat? Do you not realize that you will starve to death? If I were to die, what would you do tomorrow? If you allowed me to die today, what vocation would you pursue if my name disappeared? 4 decades you have been roaming these villages and warning the people against falling into my hands. They have bought your advice with their poor dinars and with the products of their land. What would they buy from you tomorrow, if they discovered that their wicked enemy no longer exists? Your occupation would die with me, for the people would be safe from sin. As a clergy man, do you not realize that Satan's existence alone has created his enemy, the church? That ancient conflict is the secret hand which removes the gold and silver from the faithful's pocket and deposits it forever into the pouch of the preacher and missionary. How can you permit me to die here, when you know it will surely cause you to 43. Lose your prestige, your church, your home, and your livelihood? Satan became silent for a moment, and his humility was now converted into a confident independence, and he continued, Father, you are proud, but ignorant. I will disclose to you the history of belief, and in it you will find the truth, which joins both of our beings, and ties my existence with your very conscience. In the first hour of the beginning of time, man stood before the face of the sun and stretched forth his arms and cried for the first time, saying, Behind the sky there is a great and loving and benevolent God. Then man turned his back to the great circle of light and saw his shadow upon the earth, and he hailed, in the depths of the earth there is a dark devil who loves wickedness. And the man walked toward his cave, whispering to himself, I am between two compelling forces, one in whom I must take refuge, and the 44. Other against whom I must struggle. And the ages marched in procession while man existed between two powers, one that he blessed because it exalted him, and one that he cursed because it frightened him. But he never perceived the meaning of a blessing or of a curse. He was between the two, like a tree between summer, when it blooms, and winter, when it shivers. When man saw the dawn of civilization, which is human understanding, the family as a unit came into being. Then came the tribes, whereupon law was divided according to ability and inclination. One clan cultivated the land, another built shelters, others wove raiment or hunted food. Subsequently divination made its appearance upon the earth, and this was the first career adopted by man which possessed no essential urge or necessity. Satan ceased talking for a moment. Then he laughed and his mirth shook the empty valley. But his laughter reminded him of his wounds. And he placed his hand on his side, suffering with pain. He steadied himself and continued, DV 45. Nation appeared and grew on earth in strange fashion. There was a man in the first tribe called Wis. I know not the origin of his name. He was an intelligent creature, but extremely indolent. And he detested work in the cultivation of land, construction of shelters, grazing of cattle or any pursuit requiring body movement or exertion. And since food, during that era, could not be obtained except by arduous toil, Wis slept many nights with an empty stomach. One summer night, as the members of that clan were gathered around the hut of their chief, talking of the outcome of their day and waiting for their slumber time, a man suddenly leaped to his feet, pointed toward the moon, and cried out, saying, "Look at the night god. His face is dark, and his beauty has vanished, and he has turned into a black stone hanging in the dome of the sky." The multitude gazed at the moon, shouted in awe, and shook with fear, as if the hands of darkness had clutched their hearts, for they saw the night god slowly turning into a 46. Dark ball which changed the bright countenance of the earth and caused the hills and valleys for their eyes to disappear behind a black veil. At that moment, Wis, who had seen an eclipse before, and understood its simple cause, stepped forward to make much of this opportunity. He stood in the midst of the throng, lifted his hands to the sky, and in a strong voice he addressed them, saying, "Kneel and pray, for the evil god of obscurity is locked in struggle with the illuminating night god. If the evil god conquers him, we will all perish, but if the night god triumphs over him, we will remain alive. Pray now and worship. Cover your faces with earth. Close your eyes, and lift not your heads toward the sky, for he who witnesses the two gods wrestling will lose his sight and mind, and will remain blind and insane all his life. Bend your heads low, and with all your hearts urge the night god against his enemy, who is our mortal enemy." Thus did Wis continue talking, using many cryptic words of his own fabrication which 47. They had never heard. After this crafty deception, as the moon returned to its previous glory, Wis raised his voice louder than before and said impressively, "Rise now, and look at the night god who has triumphed over his evil enemy. He is resuming his journey among the stars. Let it be known that through your prayers you have helped him to overcome the devil of darkness. He is well pleased now, and brighter than ever." The multitude rose and gazed at the moon that was shining in full beam. Their fear became tranquility, and their confusion was now joy. They commenced dancing and singing and striking with their thick sticks upon sheets of iron, filling the valleys with their clamor and shouting. That night, the chief of the tribe called Wis and spoke to him, saying, "You have done something that no man has ever done. You have demonstrated knowledge of a hidden secret that no other among us understands. Reflecting the will of my people, you are to be the highest ranking member, after me, in the tribe. I am the 48 strongest man, and you are the wisest and most learned person. You are the medium between our people and the gods, whose desires and deeds you are to interpret, and you will teach us those things necessary to gain their blessings and love." And Lawis slyly assured, everything the human God reveals to me in my divine dreams will be conveyed to you in awakeness, and you may be confident that I will act directly between you and him. The chief was assured, and gave Lawis 2 horses, 7 calves, 70 sheep, and 70 lambs, and he spoke to him, saying, the men of the tribe shall build for you a strong house, and will give you at the end of each harvest season a part of the crop of the land, so you may live as an honorable and respected master. Lawis rose and started to leave, but the chief stopped him, saying, who and what is the one whom you call the human God? Who is this daring God who wrestles with the glorious night God? We have never pondered him before. Lawis rubbed his forehead and answered him, say. 49. My honorable master, in the olden time, before the creation of man, all the gods were living peacefully together in an upper world behind the vastness of the stars. The God of gods was their father, and knew what they did not know, and did what they were unable to do. He kept for himself the divine secrets that existed beyond the eternal laws. During the 7th epoch of the 12th age, the spirit of Batar, who hated the great God, revolted and stood before his father, and said, why do you keep for yourself the power of great authority upon all creatures, hiding away from us the secrets and laws of the universe? Are we not your children who believe in you and share with you the great understanding and the perpetual being? The God of gods became enraged and said, I shall preserve for myself the primary power and the great authority and the essential secrets, for I am the beginning and the end. And Batar answered him, saying, unless you share with me your might and power, I and my children and my children's children will 50 volt against you. At that moment, the God of God stood upon his throne in the deep heavens, and drew forth a sword, and grasped the sun as a shield, and with a voice that shook all corners of eternity he shouted out, saying, descend, you evil rebel, to the dismal lower world where darkness and misery exist. There you shall remain in exile, wandering until the sun turns into ashes, and the stars into dispersed particles. In that hour, Batar descended from the upper world into the lower world, where all the evil spirits dwelt. Thereupon, he swore by the secret of life that he would fight his father and brothers by trapping every soul who loved them. As the chief listened, his forehead wrinkled, and his face turned pale. He ventured, then the name of the evil god is Batar. And Lawis responded, his name was Batar when he was in the upper world, but when he entered into the lower world, he adopted successively the names Baal-Zabul, Satanael, Belial, Zamiel, Ari, Man, Mara, Abdon, Devil, and finally Satan. Which is the most famous? 51. The chief repeated the word Satan many times with a quivering voice that sounded like the rustling of the dry branches at the passing of the wind. Then he said, why does Satan hate man as much as he hates the gods? And Lawis responded quickly, he hates man because man is a descendant of Satan's brothers and sisters. The chief exclaimed, then Satan is the cousin of man. In a voice mingled with confusion and annoyance, he retorted, yes, master, but he is their great enemy who fills their days with misery and their nights with horrible dreams. He is the power who directs the tempest toward their hovels, and brings famine upon their plantation, and disease upon them and their ani. Mals. He is an evil and powerful God, he is wicked, and he rejoices when we are in sorrow. And he mourns when we are joyous. We must, through my knowledge, examine him thoroughly. In order to avoid his evil, we must study his character, so we will not step upon his trap-laden path. The chief leaned his head upon his thick stick, and whispered, saying, I have learned now the 52. Inner secret of that strange power who directs the tempest toward our homes and brings the pestilence upon us and our cattle. The people shall learn all that I have comprehended now, and Lawis will be blessed, honored and glorified for revealing to them the mystery of their powerful enemy, and directing them away from the road of evil. And Lawis left the chief of the tribe and went to his retiring place, happy over his ingenuity, and intoxicated with the wine of his pleasure and fancy. For the first time, the chief and all of the tribe, except Lawis, spent the night slumbering in bed surrounded by horrible ghosts, fearful specters, and disturbing dreams. Satan ceased talking for a moment, while Father Simon stared at him as one bewildered. And upon the father's lips appeared the sickly laughter of death. Then Satan continued, thus divination came to this earth, and thus was my existence the cause for its appearance. Lawis was 53. The first who adopted my cruelty as a vocation. After the death of Lawis, this occupation circulated through his children and prospered until it became a perfect and divine profession, pursued by those whose minds are ripe with knowledge, and whose souls are noble, and whose hearts are pure, and whose fancy is vast. In Babylon, the people bowed 7 times in worshipping before a priest who fought me with his chantings. In Nineveh, they looked upon a man, who claimed to have known my inner secrets, as a golden link between God and man. In Tibet, they called the person who wrestled with me the son of the sun and moon. In Byblos, Ephesus, and Antioch, they offered their children's lives in sacrifice to my opponents. In Jerusalem and Rome, they placed their lives in the hands of those who claimed they hated me and fought me with all their might. In every city under the sun my name was the axis of the educational circle of religion, arts, and philosophy. Had it not been for me, no temples would have been built, no towers or palaces would 34 have been erected. I am the courage that creates resolution in man, I am the source that provokes originality of thought. I am the hand that moves man's hands. I am Satan. Everlasting. I am Satan whom the people fight in order to keep themselves alive. If they cease struggling against me, slothfulness will deaden their minds and hearts and souls, in accordance with the weird penalties of their tremendous myth. The enraged and mute tempest who agitates the minds of men and the hearts of women. And in fear of me, they will travel to places of worship to condemn me, or to places of vice to make me happy by surrendering to my will. The monk who prays in the silence of the night to keep me away from his bed is like the prostitute who invites me to her chamber. I am Satan everlasting and eternal. The builder of convents and monasteries. Upon the foundation of fear, I build wine shops and wicked houses upon the foundations of lust and self-gratification. If I cease to exist, fear and enjoyment will be abolished from the world, and 55. Through their disappearance, desires and hopes will cease to exist in the human heart. Life will become empty and cold, like a harp with broken strings. I am Satan everlasting. I am the inspiration for falsehood, slander, treachery, deceit, and mockery, and if these elements were to be removed from this world, human society would become like a deserted field in which naught would thrive but thorns of virtue. I am Satan everlasting. Tm the father and mother of sin, and if sin were to vanish, the fighters of sin would vanish with it, along with their families and structures. Tm the heart of all evil. Would you wish for human motion to stop through cessation of my heartbeats? Would you accept the result after destroying the cause? I am the cause. Would you allow me to die in this deserted wilderness? Do you desire to sever the bond that exists between you and me? Answer me, clergyman. And Satan stretched his arms and bent his head forward and gasped deeply, his face turned to 56. Gray, and he resembled one of those Egyptian statues laid waste by the ages at the side of the Nile. Then he fixed his glittering eyes upon Father Simon's face, and said, in a faltering voice, I am tired and weak. I did wrong by using my waning strength to speak on things you already knew. Now you may do as you please. You may carry me to your home and treat my wounds, or leave me in this place to die. Father Simon quivered and rubbed his hands nervously, and with apology in his voice he said, I know now what I had not known an hour ago. Forgive my ignorance. I know that your existence in this world creates temptation, and temptation is a measurement by which God adjudges the value of human souls. It is a scale which Almighty God uses to weigh the spirits. I am certain that if you die, temptation will die, and with its passing, death will destroy the ideal power which elevates and alerts man. You must live, for if you die and the people know it, their fear of hell will vanish and they will cease worshipping, for naught would be sin. You 57. Must live, for in your life is the salvation of humanity from vice and sin. As to myself, I shall sacrifice my hatred for you on the altar of my love for man. Satan uttered a laugh that rocked the ground. And he said, what an intelligent person you are, Father! And what wonderful knowledge you possess in theological facts. You have found, through the power of your knowledge, a purpose for my existence which I had never understood, and now we realize our need for each other. Come close to me, my brother. Darkness is submerging the plains, and half of my blood has escaped upon the sand of this valley, and naught remains of me but the remnants of a broken body, which death shall soon buy unless you render aid. Father Simon rolled the sleeves of his robe, and approached, and lifted Satan to his back and walked toward his home. In the midst of those valleys, engulfed with silence and embellished with the veil of darkness. 58. Father Simon walked toward the village with his back bent under his heavy burden. His black raiment and long beard were spattered with blood streaming from above him, but he struggled forward, his lips moving in fervent prayer for the life of the dying Satan. 59. The mermaids. The mermaids. The depths of the sea, surrounding the nearby islands where the sun rises, there is a profoundness. And there, where the pearl exists in abundance, lay a corpse of a youth encircled by sea maidens of long golden hair. They stared upon him with their deep blue eyes, conversing among themselves with musical voices. And the conversation, heard by the depths and conveyed to the shore by the waves, was brought to me by the frolicsome breeze. One of them said, "This is a human who teared into our world yesterday, while our sea was raging." And the second one said, "The sea was not raging." Man, who claims that he is a descendant of the gods, was making iron war, and his blood is being shed until the color of the water is now crimson. This human is a victim of war. 63. The third one ventured, "I do not know what war is, but I do know that man, after having subdued the land, became aggressive and resolved to subdue the sea. He devised a strange object, which carried him upon the seas, whereupon our severe Neptune became enraged over his greed. In order to please Neptune, man commenced of offering gifts and sacrifices, and the still body before us is the most recent gift of man to our great and terrible Neptune." The fourth one asserted, "How great is Neptune, and how cruel is his heart! If I were the Sultan of the sea, I would refuse to accept such payment. Come now, and let us examine this ransom. Perhaps we may enlighten ourselves as to the human clan." The mermaids approached the youth, probed the pockets, and found a message close to his heart. One of them read it aloud to the others. "My beloved, midnight has again come, and I have no consolation except my pouring tears, and naught to 64. Comfort me, save my hope in your return to me from between the bloody paws of war. I cannot forget your words when you took departure. Every man has a trust of tears which must be returned some day. Know not what to say, my beloved, but my soul will pour itself into parchment. My soul, that suffers through separation, but is consoled by love that renders pain a joy, and sorrow a happiness. When love unified our hearts, and we looked to the day when our two hearts would be joined by the mighty breath of God, war shouted her horrible call, and you followed her, prompted by your duty to the leaders. What is this duty that separates the lovers, and causes the women to become widows, and the children to become orphans? What is this patriotism which provokes wars and destroys kingdoms through trifles? And what cause can be more than trifling when compared to but one life? What is this duty which invites poor villagers, who are looked upon as nothing by the strong and by the sons of the inherited nobility, to die for the glory of 65. Their oppressors? If duty destroys peace among nations, and patriotism disturbs the tranquility of man's life, then let us say, peace be with duty and patriotism. No, no, my beloved. Heed not my words. Be courageous and faithful to your country. Hearken not unto the talk of a damsel, blinded by love, and lost through farewell and aloneness. If love will not restore you to me in this life, then love will surely join us in the coming life. Your forever. The mermaids replaced the note under the youth's raiment and swam silently and sorrowfully away. As they gathered together at a distance from the body of the dead soldier, one of them said, "The human heart is more severe than the cruel heart of Neptune." 66. We and you, W, are the sons of sorrow, and you are the sons of joy. We are the sons of sorrow. And sorrow is the shadow of a God who lives not in the domain of evil hearts. We are sorrowful spirits, and sorrow is too great to exist in small hearts. When you laugh, we cry and lament, and he who is seared and cleansed once with his own tears will remain pure forevermore. You understand us not, but we offer our sympathy to you. You are racing with the current of the river of life, and you do not look upon us, but we are sitting by the coast, watching you and hearing your strange voices. 69. You do not comprehend our cry, for the clamor of the days is crowding your ears, blocked with the hard substance of your years of indifference to truth, but we hear your songs, for the whispering of the night has opened our inner hearts. We see you standing under the pointing finger of light. But you cannot see us, for we are tarrying in the enlightening darkness. We are the sons of sorrow, we are the poets, and the prophets and the musicians. We weave raiment for the goddess from the threads of our hearts, and we fill the hands of the angels with the seeds of our inner selves. You are the sons of the pursuit of earthly gaiety. You place your hearts in the hands of emptiness, for the hands touch to emptiness is smooth and inviting. You reside in the house of ignorance, for in his house there is no mirror in which to view your souls. 79. We sigh, and from our sighs arise the whispering of flowers and the rustling of leaves and the murmur of rivulets. When you ridicule us, your taunts mingle with the crushing of the skulls and the rattling of shackles and the wailing of the abyss. When we cry, our tears fall into the heart of life, as dewdrops fall from the eyes of night into the heart of dawn, and when you laugh, your mocking laughter pours down like the viper's venom into a wound. We cry, and sympathize with the miserable wanderer and distressed widow, but you rejoice and smile at the sight of resplendent gold. We cry, for we listen to the moaning of the poor and the grieving of the oppressed weak. But you laugh, for you hear naught but the happy sound of the wine goblets. 7v. We cry, for our spirits are at the moment separated from God, but you laugh, for your bodies cling with unconcern to the earth. We are the sons of sorrow, and you are the sons of joy. Let us measure the outcome of our sorrow against the deeds of your joy. Before the face of the sun, you have built the pyramids upon the hearts of slaves, but the pyramids stand now upon the sand, commemorating to the ages our immortality and your evanescence. You have built Babylon upon the bones of the weak, and erected the palaces of Nineveh upon the graves of the miserable. Babylon is now but the footprint of the camel upon the moving sand of the desert, and its history is repeated to the nations who bless us and curse you. 72. We have carved Ishtar from solid marble, and made it to quiver in its solidity and speak through its muteness. We have composed and played the soothing song of Nahawand upon the strings, and caused the beloved spirit to come hovering in the firmament near to us. We have praised the Supreme Being with words and deeds. The words became as the words of God, and the deeds became overwhelming love of the angels. You are following amusement, whose sharp claws have torn thousands of martyrs in the arenas of Rome and Antioch. But we are following silence, whose careful fingers have woven the Iliad and the book of Job and the Lamentations of Jeremiah. You lie down with lust, whose tempest has swept 1,000 processions of the soul of woman away and into the pit of shame and horror. But we embrace solitude, in whose shadow the beauties of Hamlet and Dante arose. 73. You curry for the favor of greed, and the sharp swords of greed have shed 1,000 rivers of blood. But we seek company with truth, and the hands of truth have brought down knowledge from the great heart of the circle of light. We are the sons of sorrow, and you are the Sons of joy, and between our sorrow and your joy there is a rough and narrow path which your spirited horses cannot travel, and upon which your magnificent carriages cannot pass. We pity your smallness as you hate our greatness, and between our pity and your hatred, time halts bewildered. We come to you as friends, but you attack us as enemies. And between our friendship and your enmity, there is a deep ravine flowing with tears and blood. 74. We build palaces for you, and you dig graves for us, and between the beauty of the palace and the obscurity of the grave, humanity walks as a sentry with iron weapons. We spread your path with roses, and you cover our beds with thorns, and between the roses and the thorns, truth slumbers fitfully. Since the beginning of the world you have fought against our gentle power with your coarse weakness, and when you triumph over us for an hour, you croak and clamour merrily, like the frogs of the water. And when we conquer you and subdue you for an age, we remain as silent giants. You crucified Jesus and stood below him, blaspheming and mocking at him, but at last he came down and overcame the generations, and walked among you as a hero, filling the universe with his glory and his beauty. 75. You poisoned Socrates and stoned Paul and destroyed Ali Talib and assassinated Madhat Pasha, and yet those immortals are with us forever before the face of eternity. But you live in the memory of man like corpses upon the face of the earth, and you cannot find a friend who will bury you in the obscurity of non-existence and oblivion, which you sought on earth. We are the sons of sorrow, and sorrow is a rich cloud, showering the multitudes with knowledge and truth. You are the sons of joy, and as high as your joy may reach, by the law of God it must be destroyed before the winds of heaven and dispersed into nothingness, for it is naught but a thin and wavering pillar of smoke. The poet. I am a stranger in this world, and there is a severe solitude and painful lonesomeness in my exile. I am alone, but in my aloneness I contemplate an unknown and enchanting country, and this meditation fills my dreams with specters of a great and distant land which my eyes have never seen. I am a stranger among my people and I have no friends. When I see a person I say within myself, who is he, and in what manner do I know him? And why is he here, and what law has joined me with him? I am a stranger to myself, and when I hear my tongue speak, my ears wonder over my voice, I see my inner self smiling, crying, braving, and fearing, and my existence wonders over my substance, while my soul interrogates my heart, but I remain unknown, engulfed by tremendous silence. 79. My thoughts are strangers to my body, and as I stand before the mirror, I see something in my face which my soul does not see, and I find in my eyes what my inner self does not find. When I walk vacant-eyed through the streets of the clamorous city, the children follow me, shouting, "Here is a blind man. Let us give him a walking cane to feel his way." When I run from them, I meet with a group of maidens, and they grasp the edges of my garment, saying, "He is deaf like the rock, let us fill his ears with the music of love." And when I flee from them, a throng of aged people point at me with trembling fingers and say, "He is a madman who lost his mind in the world of genii and ghouls." Asterisk 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 asterisk. I am a stranger in this world, I roamed the universe from end to end, but could not find a place to rest my head, nor did I know any human I confronted, neither an individual who would hearken to my mind. When I open my sleepless eyes at dawn, I find 80. Myself imprisoned in a dark cave from whose ceiling hang the insects and upon whose floor crawl the vipers. When I go out to meet the light, the shadow of my body follows me, but the shadow of my spirit precedes me and leads the way to an unknown place, seeking things beyond my understanding, and grasping objects that are meaningless to me. At eventide I return and lie upon my bed, made of soft feathers and lined with thorns, and I contemplate and feel the troublesome and happy desires, and sense the painful and joyous hopes. At midnight the ghosts of the past ages and the spirits of the forgotten civilization enter through the crevices of the cave to visit me. I stare at them and they gaze upon me, I talk to them and they answer me smilingly. Then I endeavor to clutch them, but they sift through my fingers and vanish like the mist which rests on the lake. Asterisk 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 asterisk. I am a stranger in this world, and there is no one in the universe who understands the language I 81 speak. Patterns of bizarre remembrance form suddenly in my mind, and my eyes bring forth queer images and sad ghosts. I walk in the deserted prairies, watching the streamlets running fast, up and up from the depths of the valley to the top of the mountain. I watch the naked trees blooming and bearing fruit, and shedding their leaves in one instant, and then I see the branches fall and turn into speckled snakes. I see the birds hovering above, singing and wailing, then they stop and open their wings and turn into undraped maidens with long hair, looking at me from behind cold and infatuated eyes, and smiling at me with full lips soaked with honey, stretching their scented hands toward me. Then they ascend and disappear from my sight like phantoms, leaving in the firmament the resounding echo of their taunts and mocking laughter. I am a stranger in this world. I am a poet who composes what life proses, and who proses what life composes. For this reason I am a stranger, and I shall remain a stranger until the white and friendly 82 wings of death carry me home into my beautiful country. There, where light and peace and understanding abide, I will await the other strangers, who will be rescued by the friendly trap of time from this narrow, dark world. Ashes of the ages and eternal fire. Ashes of the ages and eternal fire. Part I. Spring of the year 116 BC. Nier had fallen and silence prevailed while life slumbered in the city of the sun asterisk, and the lamps were extinguished in the scattered houses about the majestic temples amidst the olive and laurel trees. The moon poured its silver rays upon the white marble columns that stood like giants in the silence of the night, guarding the gods' temples and looking with perplexity toward the towers of Lebanon that sat bristling upon the four heads of the distant hills. Asterisk Baalbek, or the city of Baal, called by the ancients Ihe city of the sun, was built in honor of the sun god Heliopolis, and historians assert that Baalbek was the most beautiful city in the Middle East. Its ruins, which we observe at present time, indicate that the architecture was largely influenced by the Romans during the occupation of Syria. Editor's note. 87. At that hour, while souls succumbed to the lure of slumber, Nathan, the son of the high priest, entered Ishtar's temple, bearing a torch in trembling hands. He lighted the lamps and censers until the aromatic scent of myrrh and frank incense reached to the farthest corners. Then he knelt before the altar, studded with inlays of ivory and gold, raised his hands toward Ishtar, and with a painful and choking voice he cried out, saying, "Have mercy upon me, O great Ishtar, goddess of love and beauty. Be merciful, and remove the hands of death from my beloved, whom my soul has chosen by thy will. The potions of the physicians and the wizards do not restore her life. Neither the enchantments of the priests and the sorcerers. Naught is left to be done except thy holy will. Thou art my guide and my aid. Have mercy on me and grant my prayers. Gaze upon my crushed heart and aching soul. Spare my beloveds." Ishtar was the great goddess of the Phoenicians. They shipped her in the cities of Tyre, Sidon, Sur, Jabil, and Baalbek, and described her as the burner of the torch of life, and guardian of youth. Greece adored her after Phoenicia, calling her the goddess of love and beauty. The Romans called her Venus. Editor's note. 88. Life, so that we may rejoice with the secrets of thy love, and glory in the beauty of youth that reveals the mystery of thy strength and wisdom. From the depths of my heart I cry unto thee, O exalted Ishtar, and from behind the darkness of the night I beg thy mercy. Hear me, O Ishtar. I am thy good servant Nathan, the son of the high priest Hiram, and I devote all of my deeds and words to thy greatness at thy altar. Love a maiden amongst all maidens and made her my companion, but the genii brides envied her, and blew into her body a strange affliction, and sent unto her the messenger of death, who is standing by her bed like a hungry spectre, spreading his black-ribbed wings over her, stretching forth his sharp claws in readiness to prey upon her. I come here now beseeching you to have mercy upon me, and spare that flower who has not yet rejoiced with the summer of life. Save her from the grasp of death, so we may sing joyfully thy praise and burn incense in thine honor, and offer sacrifices at thy altar, filling thy vases with perfumed oil and spreading roses and 89. Violets upon the portico of thy place of worship, burning frankincense before thy shrine. Save her, O Ishtar, goddess of miracles, and let love come death in this struggle of joy against Sor. Ro. Asterisk. Nathan then became silent. His eyes were flooded with tears and his heart was uttering Sor. Roful sighs. Then he continued, "Alas, my dreams are shattered, O Ishtar divine, and my heart is melted within. Enliven me with thy mercy and spare my beloved." At that moment one of his slaves entered the temple, hastened to Nathan, and whispered to him, "She has opened her eyes, master," and looked about her bed, but could not find you. Then she called for you, and I used all speed to advise you. Nathan departed hurriedly, and the slave followed him. During the era of ignorance, the Arabs believed that if a genie loved a human youth, she would prevent him from marrying, and if he did wed, she would bewitch the bride and cause her to die. This mythological superstition persists today in some small villages in Lebanon. Editor's note. Go. When he reached his palace, he entered the chamber of the ailing maiden, leaned over her bed, held her frail hand, and printed several kisses upon her lips, as if striving to breathe into her body a new life from his own life. She moved her head on the silk cushions and opened her eyes, and upon her lips appeared the phantom of a smile, which was the faint residue of life in her wasted body, the echo of the calling of a heart which is racing toward a halt, and with a voice that spoke the weakening cries of a hungry infant on The breast of a withered mother, she said, the goddess has called me, O life of my soul, and death has come to sever me from you, but fear not, for the will of the goddess is sacred, and the demands of death are just. I am departing now. And I hear the rustle of the whiteness descending. But the cups of love and youth are still full in our hands, and the flowered paths of beautiful life are extended before us. I am embarking, my beloved, upon an ark of the Spirit, and I shall come back to this world, for great Ishtar will bring back to life those souls of loving humans who departed to eternity before they enjoyed the sweetness of love and the happiness of youth. We shall meet again, O Nathan, and drink together the dew of the dawn from the cupped petals of the lilies, and rejoice with the birds of the fields over the colors of the rainbow. Until then, my forever, farewell. Asterisk. Her voice lowered and her lips trembled like a lone flower before the gusts of dawn. Nathan M. braced her with pouring tears, and as he pressed his lips upon her lips, he found them cold as the stone of the field. He uttered a terrible cry and commenced tearing his raiment. He threw himself upon her dead body while his shivering soul was sailing fitfully between the mountain of life and the precipice of death. In the silence of the night, the slumbering souls were awakened. Women and children were. Many Asiatics pursue this belief with conviction, having derived it from their holy writings. Mohammed said, "You were dead and he brought you back to life, and he will deaden you again and then will enliven you, whereupon you shall go back to him." Buddha said, "Yesterday we existed in this life, and now we came. And we will continue to go back until we become perfect like the God." Editor's note. G2. Frightened as they heard mighty rumbling and painful wailing and bitter lamentation coming from the corners of the palace of the high priest of Ishtar. When the tired morn arrived, the people asked about Nathan to offer their sympathy, but were told that he had disappeared. And after a fortnight, the chief of a caravan arriving from the east related that he had seen Nathan in the distant wilderness, wandering with a flock of gazelles. The ages passed, crushing with their invisible feet the feeble acts of the civilizations, and the goddess of love and beauty had left the country. A strange and fickle goddess took her place. She destroyed the magnificent temples of the city of the sun and demolished its beautiful palaces. The blooming orchards and fertile prairies were laid waste, and nothing was left in that spot save ruins, commemorating to the aching souls the ghosts of yesterday, repeating to the sorrowful spirits only the echo of the hymns of glory. 93. But the severe ages that crushed the deeds of man could not destroy his dreams, nor could they weaken his love, for dreams and affections are ever living with the eternal spirit. They may disappear for a time, pursuing the sun when the night comes, and the stars when morning appears. But like the lights of heaven, they must surely return. Part 2. Spring of the year 1890 AD. The day was over, nature was making her many preparations for slumber, and the sun withdrew its golden rays from the plains of Baalbek. Ali el-Hosseini * brought his herd back to the shed in the midst of the ruins of the temples. He sat there near the ancient columns which symbolized the bones of countless soldiers left behind in the field of battle. The sheep folded around him, charmed with the music of his flute. * The Hassianis are groups comprising an Arabian tribe, at present living in tents pitched in the plains surrounding the ruins of Baalbek. Editor's note. 94. Midnight came, and heaven sowed the seeds of the following day in the deep furrows of the darkness. Ali's eyes became tired of the phantoms of awakeness, and his mind was wearied by the procession of ghosts marching in horrible silence amidst the demolished walls. He leaned upon his arm, and sleep captured his senses with the extreme end of its plaited veil, like a delicate cloud touching the face of a calm lake. He forgot his actual self and encountered his invisible self, rich with dreams and ideals higher than the laws and teachings of man. The circle of vision broadened before his eyes, and life's hidden secrets gradually became apparent to him. His soul abandoned the rapid parade of time rushing toward nothingness. It stood alone before symmetrical thoughts and crystal ideas. For the first time in his life, Ali was aware of the causes for the spiritual famine that had accompanied his youth. The famine which levels away the pit between the sweetness and the bitterness of life. That thirst which unites into contentment the sighs of affection and the silence of satisfaction. That longing. 95. Which cannot be vanquished by the glory of the world nor twisted by the passing of the ages. Ali felt the surge of a strange affection and a kind tenderness within himself which was memory, enlivening itself like incense placed upon white firebrands. It was a magic love whose soft fingers had touched Ali's heart as a musician's delicate fingers touch quivering strings. It was a new power emanating from nothingness and growing forcefully, embracing his real self and filling his spirit with ardent love, at once painful and sweet. Ali looked toward the ruins and his heavy eyes became alert as he fancied the glory of those devas Tate shrines that stood as mighty, impregnable, and eternal temples long before. His eyes became motionless and the breathing of his heart quick. And like a blind man whose sight has suddenly been restored, he commenced to see, think, and meditate. He recollected the lamps and the silver censers that surrounded the image of an adored and revered goddess. He remembered the priests offering sacrifices before an altar built of ivory and gold. He envisioned the dank 96 maidens, and the tambourine players, and the singers who chanted the praise of the goddess of love and beauty. He saw all this before him, and felt the impression of their obscurity in the chalk-ing depths of his heart. But memory alone brings naught save echoes of voices heard in the depths of the long ago. What, then, is the bizarre relationship between these powerful, weaving memories and the past actual life of a simple youth who was born in a tent and who spent the spring of his life grazing sheep in the valleys? Ali gathered himself and walked amidst the ruins, and the gnawing memories suddenly tore the veil of oblivion from his thoughts. As he reached the great and cavernous entrance to the temple, he halted as if a magnetic power gripped him and fastened his feet. As he looked downward, he found a smashed statue on the ground. He broke from the grasp of the unseen and at once his soul's tears unleashed and poured like blood issuing from a deep wound. His heart roared in ebb and flow like the welling waves of the sea. 97. He sighed bitterly and cried painfully, for he felt a stabbing aloneness and a destructive remoteness standing as an abyss between his heart and the heart from whom he was torn before he entered upon this life. He felt that his soul's element was but a flame from the burning torch which God had separated from himself before the passing of the ages. He perceived the feathery touch of delicate wings rustling about his flaming heart, and A great love possessing him. A love whose power separates the mind from the world of quantity and measurement. A love that talks when the tongue of life is muted. A love that stands as a blue beacon to point out the path, guiding with no visible light. That love, or that God who descended in that quiet hour upon Ali's heart, had seared into his being a bitter and sweet affection, like thorns growing by the side of the flourishing flowers. But who is this love, and whence did he come? What does he desire of a shepherd kneeling in the midst of those ruins? Is it a seed sown without awareness in the domain of the heart by a Bedouin? 98. Maiden. Or a beam appeared from behind a dark cloud to illuminate life? Is it a dream that crept close in the silence of the night to ridicule him? Or is it truth that existed since the beginning, and shall continue to exist until the ending? Ali closed his tearful eyes and stretched forth his arms like a beggar, and exclaimed, "Who are you, standing close to my heart but away from my sight, yet acting as a great wall between me and my real self, binding my today with my forgotten past? Are you the phantom of a spectre from eternity to show me the vanity of life and the weakness of mankind? Or the spirit of a genie appeared from the earth's crevices to enslave me and render me an object of mockery amongst the youths of my tribe? Who are you, and what is this strange power which at one time deadens and enlivens my heart? Who am I, and what is this strange self whom I call myself? Has the water of life which I drank made of me an angel, seeing and hearing the mysterious secrets of the universe, or is it merely an evil wine that intoxicated me and blinded me from myself? 99. He became silent, while his anxiety grew and his spirit exulted. Then he continued, "Oh, that which the soul reveals, and the night conceals. Oh, beautiful spirit, hovering in the sky of my dream, you have awakened in me a dormant fullness, like healthy seeds hidden under the blankets of snow. You have passed me like a frolicsome breeze, carrying to my hungry self the fragrance of the flowers of heaven. You have touched my senses and agitated and quivered them like the leaves of the trees. Let me look upon you now, if you are a human, or command slumber to shut my eyes so I can view your vastness through my inner being. Let me touch you, let me hear your voice. Tear away this veil that conceals my entire purpose, and destroy this wall that hides my deity from my clearing eyes, and place upon me a pair of wings so I may fly behind you to the halls of the supreme universe. Or bewitch my eyes so I may follow you to the ambush of the genii if you are one of their brides. If I am worthy, place your hand upon my heart and possess me." Ali was whispering these words into the mystic 00 darkness, and before him crept the ghosts of night, as if they were vapor coming from his boiling tears. Upon the walls of the temple he fancied magical pictures painted with the brush of the rainbow. Thus did 1 hour pass, with Ali shedding tears, and reveling in his miserable plight, and hearing the beats of his heart, looking beyond the objects, as if he were observing the images of life vanishing slowly and being replaced with a dream, strange in its beauty and terrible in enormity. Like a prophet who meditates the stars of heaven awaiting the descent and revelation, he pondered the power existing beyond these contemplations. He felt that his spirit left him and probed through the temples for a priceless but unknown segment of himself, lost among the ruins. Dawn had appeared and silence roared with the passing of the breeze. The first rays of light raced through illuminating the particles of the ether. And the sky smiled like a dreamer viewing his beloved's phantom. The birds probed from their sanctuary in the crevices of the walls and emerged into the halls of the columns, singing their morning prayers. Ali placed his cupped hand over his forehead, looking downward with glazed eyes. Like Adam, when God opened his eyes with almighty breath, Ali saw new objects, strange and fantastic. Then he approached his sheep and called to them, whereupon they followed him quietly toward the lush fields. He led them, as he gazed at the sky like a philosopher divining and meditating the secrets of the universe. He reached a brook whose murmuring was soothing to the spirit, and he sat by the edge of the spring under the willow tree, whose branches dipped over the water as if drinking from the cool depths. The dew of dawn glistened upon the sheep's wood as they grazed amid flowers and green grass. In a few moments Ali again felt that his heart beats were increasing rapidly and his spirit commenced to vibrate violently, almost visibly. Like a mother suddenly awakened from her slumber by the scream of her child, he bolted from his position, and as his eyes were compelled to her, he saw 102. A beautiful maiden carrying an earthenware container upon her shoulder, slowly approaching the far side of the brook. As she reached the edge and leaned forward to fill the jar, she glanced across, and her eyes met Ali's eyes. As if in insanity she cried out, dropped the jar, and withdrew swiftly. Then she turned, gazing at Ali with anxious, agonizing disbelief. A minute passed, whose seconds were glittering lamps illuminating their hearts and spirits, and silence brought vague remembrance, revealing to them images and scenes far away from that brook and those trees. They heard each other in the understanding silence, listening tearfully to each other's sighs of heart and soul until complete knowing prevailed between the two. Ali, still compelled by a mysterious power, leaped across the brook and approached the maiden, embraced her and printed a long kiss upon her lips. As if the sweetness of Ali's caress had usurped her will, she did not move, and the kind touch of Ali's arms had stolen her strength. She yielded to him as the fragrance of jasmine. 103. Concedes to the vibration of the breeze, carrying it into the spacious firmament. She placed her head upon his chest like a toured person who has found rest. She sighed deeply, a sigh that announced the rebirth of happiness in a torn heart and proclaimed a revolution of wings that had ascended after having been injured and committed to earth. She raised her head and looked at him with her soul, the look of a human which, in mighty silence, belittles the conventional words used amongst mankind, the expression which offers myriads of thoughts in the unspoken language of the hearts. She bore the look of a person who accepts love not as a spirit in a body of words, but as a reunion occurring long after two souls were divided by earth and joined by God. The enamored couple walked amidst the willow trees, and the singleness of two selves was a speaking tongue for their unification, a seeing eye for the glory of happiness, a silent listener to the tremendous revelation of love. The sheep continued grazing, and the birds of 104. The sky still hovered above their heads, singing the song of dawn, following the emptiness of night. As they reached the end of the valley, the sun appeared, spreading a golden garment upon the knolls and the hills, and they sat by the side of a rock where the violets hid. The maiden looked into Ali's black eyes while the breeze caressed her hair, as if the shimmering wisps were fingertips. craving for sweet kisses. She felt as though some magic and strong gentleness were touching her lips in spite of her will, and with a serene and charming voice she said, Ishtar has restored both of our spirits to this life from another, so we may not be denied the joy of love and the glory of youth, my beloved. Ali closed his eyes, as if her musical voice brought to him images of a dream he had seen. And he felt an invisible pair of wings carrying him from that place and depositing him in a strange chamber by the side of a bed upon which lay the corpse of a maiden whose beauty had been claimed by death. He cried fearfully, then opened his eyes and found that same maiden sitting by his side. 105. And upon her lips appeared a smile. Her eyes shone with the rays of life. Ali's face brightened and his heart was refreshed. The phantom of his vision withdrew slowly until he forgot completely the past and its cares. The two lovers embraced and drank the wine of sweet kisses together until they became intoxicated. They slumbered, wrapped between each other's arms, until the last remnant of the shadow was dispersed by the eternal power which had awakened them. 106. Between night and morn. Between night and morn. Be silent, my heart, for the space cannot hear you. Be silent, for the ether is laden with cries and moans, and cannot carry your songs and hymns. Be silent, for the phantoms of the night will not give heed to the whispering of your secrets, nor will the processions of darkness halt before your dreams. Be silent, my heart, until dawn comes. For he who patiently awaits the morn will meet him surely, and he who loves the light will be loved by the light. Be silent, my heart, and hearken to my story. In my dream I saw a nightingale singing over the throat of a fiery volcano, and I saw a lily raising her 109 head above the snow, and a naked houri dancing in the midst of the graves, and an infant playing with skulls while laughing. I saw all these images in my dream, and when I opened my eyes and looked about me, I saw the volcano still raging, but no longer heard the nightingale sing. Nor did I see him hovering. I saw the sky spreading snow upon the fields and valleys, and concealing under white shrouds the stilled bodies of the lilies. I saw a row of graves before the silence of the ages, but there was no person dancing or praying in their midst. I saw a heap of skulls, but no one was there to laugh, save the wind. In my awakeness I saw grief and sorrow. What became of the joy and sweetness of my dream? Where has the beauty of my dream gone, and in what manner did the images disappear? 110. How can the soul be patient until slumber restores the happy phantoms of hope and desire? Give heed, my heart, and hear my story. Yesterday my soul was like an old and strong tree, whose roots grasped into the depths of the earth, and whose branches reached the infinite. My soul blossomed in spring, and gave fruit in summer, and when autumn came, I gathered the fruit on a silver tray and placed it by the walker's portion of the street, and all who passed partook willingly and continued to walk. And when autumn passed away, and submerged his rejoicing under wailing and lamentation, I looked upon my tray and found but one fruit remaining. I took it and placed it into my mouth, but found it bitter as gall, and sour as the hard grapes, and I said to myself, woe to me, for I have placed a till curse in the mouths of the people, and an ailment in their bodies. What have you done, my soul, with the sweet sap which your roots have sucked from the earth, and the fragrance which you have drawn from the sky? In anger did I tear the strong and old tree of my soul, with each of the struggling roots, from the depths of the earth. I uprooted it from the past, and took from it the memories of 1,000 springs and 1,000 autumns, and I planted the tree of my soul in another place. It was now in a field afar from the path of time, and I tended it in day and in night, saying within me, wakefulness will bring us closer to the stars. I watered it with blood and tears, saying, there is a flavor in blood, and a sweetness in tears. When spring returned, my tree bloomed again, and in the summer it too bore fruit. And when autumn came, I gathered all the ripe fruit upon a golden plate and offered it in the public path, and the people passed, but none desired my fruit. Then I took one fruit and brought it to my lips, and it was sweet as the honeycomb, and exhilarating as the wine of Babylon, and fragrant as the jasmine. And I cried out, saying, the people do not want a blessing in their mouths, nor a truth in their hearts, for blessing is the daughter of tears, and truth is the son of blood. I left the noisome city to sit in the shadow of the solitary tree of my soul, in a field far from life's path. Be silent, my heart, until dawn comes. Be silent and attend my story. Yesterday my thoughts were a boat sailing amidst the waves in the sea, and moving 113 with the winds from one land to another. And my boat was empty except of 7 jars of rainbow colors, and the time came when I grew weary of moving about on the face of the sea, and I said to myself, T shall return with the empty boat of my thoughts to the harbor of the isle of my birth. And I prepared by coloring my boat yellow like the sunset, and green like the heart of spring, and blue like the sky, and red like the anemone. And on the masts and on the rudder I drew strange figures that compelled the attention and dazzled the eye. And as I ended my task, the boat of my thoughts seemed as a prophetic vision, sailing between the two infinities, the sea and the sky. I entered the harbor of the isle of my birth, and the people surged to meet me with singing and merriment. And the 114 throngs invited me to enter the city. And they were plucking their instruments and sounding their tambourines. Such welcome was mine because my boat was beautifully decorated, and none entered and saw the interior of the boat of my thoughts, nor asked what I had brought from beyond the seas. Nor could they observe that I had brought my boat back empty, for its brilliance had rendered them blind. Thereupon I said within myself, I have led the people astray, and with 7 jars of colors I have cheated their eyes. Thereafter, I embarked in the boat of my thoughts, again to set sail. 1. Visited the East Islands and gathered myrrh, frankincense, and sandalwood, and placed them in my boat. I roamed the West Islands and brought ivory and ruby, and emerald and many rare gems. I 115 journeyed the South Islands and carried back with me beautiful armors and glittering swords and spears and all varieties of weapons. I filled the boat of my thoughts with the choicest and most precious things on earth, and returned to the harbor of the isle of my birth, saying, the people shall again glorify me, but with honesty, and they shall again invite me to enter their city, but with merit. And when I reached the harbor, none came to meet me. I walked the streets of my earlier glory, but no person looked upon me. I stood in the marketplace, shouting to the people of the treasures in my boat, and they mocked at me and heeded not. I returned to the harbor with spiritless heart and disappointment and confusion. And when I gazed upon my boat, I observed 116. A thing which I had not seen during my voyage, and I exclaimed, the waves of the sea have done away with the colors and the figures on my boat and caused it to look like a skeleton. The winds and the spray, together with the burning sun, had effaced the brilliant hues, and my boat looked now like tattered grey raiment. I could not observe these changes from amid my treasures, for I had blinded my eyes from the inside. I had gathered the most precious things on earth and placed them in a floating chest upon the face of the water, and returned to my people, but they cast me away and could not see me, for their eyes had been allured by empty, shimmering objects. At that hour I left the boat of my thoughts for the city of the dead, and sat in the midst of the trim graves, contemplating their secrets. 117. Be silent, my heart, until dawn comes. Be silent, for the raging tempest is ridiculing your inner whispering, and the caves of the valleys do not echo the vibration of your strings. Be silent, my heart, until morn comes. For he who awaits patiently the coming of dawn will be embraced longingly by morning tide. Dawn is breaking. Speak if you are able, my heart. Here is the procession of morning tide. Why do you not speak? Has not the silence of the night left a song in your inner depths with which you may meet dawn? Here are the swarms of doves and the nightingales moving in the far portion of the valley. Are you capable of flying with the birds, or has the horrible night weakened your wings? The shepherds are 118. Leading the sheep from their folds, has the phantom of the night left strength in you, so you may walk behind them to the green prairies? The young men and women are walking gracefully toward the vineyards. Will you be able to stand and walk with them? Rise, my heart, and walk with dawn, for the night has passed, and the fear of darkness has vanished with its black dreams and ghastly thoughts and insane travels. Rise, my heart, and raise your voice with music, for he who shares not dawn with his songs is one of the sons of ever darkness. 119. The secrets of the heart. The secrets of the heart. A majestic mansion stood under the wings of the silent night, as life stands under the cover of death. In it sat a maiden at an ivory desk, leaning her beautiful head on her soft hand, as a withering lily leans upon its petals. She looked around, feeling like a miserable prisoner, struggling to penetrate the walls of the dungeon with her eyes in order to witness life walking in the procession of freedom. The hours passed like the ghosts of the night, as a procession chanting the dirge of her sorrow, and the maiden felt secure with the shedding of her tears in anguished solitude, when she could not resist the pressure of her suffering any longer. And as she felt that she was in full possession of the treasured secrets of her heart, she took the quill and commenced mingling her tears with ink upon parchment, and she inscribed 123. My beloved sister. When the heart becomes congested with secrets, and the eyes begin to burn from the searing tears, and the ribs are about to burst with the growing of the heart's confinement, one cannot find expression for such a labyrinth except by a surge of release. Sorrowful persons find joy in lamentation, and lovers encounter comfort and condolence in dreams, and the oppressed delight in receiving sympathy. I am writing to you now because I feel like a poet who fancies the beauty of objects whose impression he composes in verse while being ruled by a divine power. I am like a child of the starving poor who cries for food, instigated by bitterness of hunger, disregarding the plight of his poor and merciful mother and her defeat in life. Listen to my painful story, my dear sister, and weep with me, for sobbing is like a prayer, and the tears of mercy are like a charity because they come forth from a living and sensitive and good soul, and they are not shed in vain. It was the will of my father when I married a noble and rich man. My 124. Father was like most of the rich, whose only joy in life is to improve their wealth by adding more gold to their coffers in fear of poverty, and curry nobility with grandeur in anticipation of the attacks of the black days. I find myself now, with all my love and dreams, a victim upon a golden altar which I hate, and an inherited honor which I despise. I respect my husband because he is generous and kind to all. He endeavors to bring happiness to me, and spends his gold to please my heart, but I have found that the impression of all these things is not worth one moment of a true and divine love. Do not ridicule me, my sister, for I am now a most enlightened person regarding the needs of a woman's heart, that throbbing heart which is like a bird flying in the spacious sky of love. It is like a vase replenished with the wine of the ages that has been pressed for the sipping souls. It is like a book in whose pages one reads the chapters of happiness and misery, joy and pain, laughter and sorrow. No one can read this book except the true companion, who is the other half. 125. Of the woman, created for her since the beginning of the world. Yes, I became most knowing amongst all women as to the purpose of the soul and meaning of the heart, for I have found that my magnificent horses and beautiful carriages and glittering fers of gold and sublime nobility are not worth one glance from the eyes of that poor young man who is patiently waiting and suffering the pangs of bitterness and misery. That youth who is oppressed by the cruelty and will of my father, and imprisoned in the narrow and melancholy jail of life. Please, my dear, do not contrive to console me for the calamity through which I have realized. The power of my love is my great consoler. Now I am looking forward from behind my tears and awaiting the coming of death to lead me to where I will meet the companion of my soul and embrace him as I did before we entered this strange world. Do not think evil of me, for I am doing my duty as a faithful wife, and complying calmly and 126. Patiently with the laws and rules of man. I honor my husband with my sense, and respect him with my heart, and revere him with my soul, but there is a withholding, for God gave part of me to my beloved before I knew him. Heaven willed that I spend my life with a man not meant for me, and I am wasting my days silently according to the will of heaven. But if the gates of eternity do not open, I will remain with the beautiful half of my soul and look back to the past, and that past is this present. I shall look at life as spring looks at winter, and contemplate the obstacles of life as one who has climbed the rough trail and reached the mountain top. At that moment the maiden ceased writing and hid her face with her cupped hands and wept Turley. Her heart declined to entrust to the pen its most sacred secrets, but resorted to the pouring of dry tears that dispersed quickly and mingled with the gentle ether, the haven of the lovers' souls. And 127. The flower's spirits. After a moment she took the quill and added, "Do you remember that youth? Do you recollect the rays which emanated from his eyes, and the sorrowful signs upon his face? Do you recall that laughter which bespoke the tears of a mother, torn from her only child? Can you retrace his serene voice speaking the echo of a distant valley? Do you remember him meditating and staring longingly and calmly at objects and speaking of them in strange words, and then bending his head and sighing as if fearing to reveal the secrets of his great heart? Do you recall his dreams and beliefs? Do you recollect all these things in a youth whom humanity counts as one of her children, and upon whom my father looked with eyes of superiority because he is higher than earthly greed and nobler than inherited grandeur? You know, my dear sister, that I am a martyr in this belittling world, and a victim of ignorance. Will you sympathize with a sister who sits in the silence of the horrible night pouring down the contents of her inner self and revealing to you her heart's secrets? 1. I am sure that you will sympathize. 128. With me, for I know that love has visited your heart. Dawn came, and the maiden surrendered her self to slumber, hoping to find sweeter and more gentle dreams than those she had encountered in her awakeness. 129. My countrymen! My countrymen! Where do you seek, my countrymen? Do you desire that I build for you gorgeous palaces, decorated with words of empty meaning, or temples roofed with dreams? Or do you command me to destroy what the liars and tyrants have built? Shall I uproot with my fingers what the hypocrites and the wicked have implanted? Speak your insane wish. What is it you would have me do, my countrymen? Shall I purr like the kitten to satisfy you, or roar like the lion to please myself? I have sung for you, but you did not dance. I have wept before you, but 133. You did not cry. Shall I sing and weep at the same time? Your souls are suffering the pangs of hunger, and yet the fruit of knowledge is more plentiful than the stones of the valleys. Your hearts are withering from thirst, and yet the springs of life are streaming about your homes. Why do you not drink? The sea has its ebb and flow. The moon has its fullness and crescents, and the ages have their winter and summer, and all things vary like the shadow of an unborn God moving between earth and sun, but truth cannot be changed, nor will it pass away. Why, then, do you endeavor to disfigure its countenance? 134. I have called you in the silence of the night to point out the glory of the moon and the dignity of the stars, but you startled from your slumber and clutched your swords in fear, crying, "Where is the enemy? We must kill him first." At morning tide, when the enemy came, I called to you again, but now you did not wake from your slumber, for you were locked in fear, wrestling with the processions of specters in your dreams. And I said unto you, "Let us climb to the mountain top and view the beauty of the world." And you answered me, saying, "In the depths of this valley our fathers lived, and in its shadow they died, and in its caves they were buried." How can? 135. We depart this place for one which they failed to honor. And I said unto you, let us go to the plain that gives its bounty to the sea. And you spoke timidly to me, saying, the uproar of the abyss will frighten our spirits, and the terror of the depths will deaden our bodies. I have loved you, my countrymen, but my love for you is painful to me, and useless to you, and today I hate you, and hatred is a flood that sweeps away the dry branches and quavering houses. I have pitied your weakness, my countrymen, but my pity has but increased your feebleness, exalting and nourishing slothfulness which 136 is vain to life. And today I see your infirmity which my soul loathes and fears. I have cried over your humiliation and submission, and my tears streamed like crystalline, but could not sear away your stagnant weakness, yet they removed the veil from my eyes. My tears have never reached your petrified hearts, but they cleansed the darkness from my inner self. Today I am mocking at your suffering, for laughter is a raging thunder that precedes the tempest and never comes after it. What do you desire, my countrymen? Do you wish for me to show you the ghost of your countenance on the face of still water? Come now, and see how ugly you are. 137. Look and meditate. Fear has turned your hair grey as the ashes, and dissipation has grown over your eyes and made them into obscured hollows, and cowardice has touched your cheeks that now appear as dismal pits in the valley, and death has kissed your lips and left them yellow as the autumn leaves. What is it that you seek, my countrymen? What ask you from life, who does not any longer count you among her children? Your souls are freezing in the clutches of the priests and sorcerers, and your bodies tremble between the paws of the despots and the shedders of blood, and your country quakes under the marching feet of the 138. Conquering enemy. What may you expect even though you stand proudly before the face of the sun? Your swords are sheathed with rust, and your spears are broken, and your shields are laden with gaps. Why, then, do you stand in the field of battle? Hypocrisy is your religion, and falsehood is your life, and nothingness is your ending. Why, then, are you living? Is not death the sole comfort of the miserable? Life is a resolution that accompanies youth, and a diligence that follows maturity, and a wisdom that pursues senility. But you, my countrymen, were born old and weak, and your skins withered. 139. And your heads shrank, whereupon you became as children, running into the mire and casting stones upon each other. Knowledge is a light, enriching the warmth of life, and all may partake who seek it out, but you, my countrymen, seek out darkness, and flee the light, awaiting the coming of water from the rock. And your nation's misery is your crime. He do not forgive you your sins, for you know what you are doing. Humanity is a brilliant river, singing its way and carrying with it the mountain secrets into the heart of the sea, but you, my countrymen, are stagnant marshes infested with insects and vipers. 140. The spirit is a sacred blue torch, burning and devouring the dry plants, and growing with the storm and illuminating the faces of the goddesses, but you, my countrymen, your souls are like ashes which the winds scatter upon the snow, and which the tempests disperse forever in the valleys. Fear not the phantom of death, my countrymen, for his greatness and mercy will refuse to approach your smallness, and dread not the dagger, for it will decline to be lodged in your shallow hearts. I hate you, my countrymen, because you hate glory and greatness. I despise you because you despise yourselves. I am your enemy, for you refuse to realize that you are the enemies of the goddesses. 141. John the Madman. John the Madman. In summer John walked every morning into the field, driving his oxen and carrying his plough over his shoulder, hearkening to the soothing songs of the birds and the rustling of the leaves and the grass. At noon he sat beside a brook in the colorful prairies for repast, leaving a few morsels upon the green grass for the birds of the sky. At eventide he returned to his wretched hovel that stood apart from those hamlets and villages in North Lebanon. After the evening meal he sat and listened attentively to his parents, who related tales of the past ages until sleep allured and captured his eyes. In winter he spent his days by the fireside, during the wailing of the winds and lamentation of the elements, meditating upon the phenomena of the seasons, and looking through the window. 145. Toward the snow-laden valleys and leafless trees, symbolizing a multitude of suffering people left helpless in the jaws of biting frost and strong wind. During the long winter nights he sat up until his parents retired, whereupon he opened a rough wooden closet, brought out his New Testament, and read it secretly under the dim light of a flickering lamp. The priests objected to the reading of the good book, and John exercised great caution during these fascinating moments of study. The fathers warned the simpy-hearted people against its use, and threatened them with excommunication from the church if discovered posses sing it. Thus John spent his youth between the beautiful earth of God and the New Testament, full of light and truth. John was a youth of silence and contemplation. He listened to his parents' conversations and never spoke a word nor asked a question. When sitting with his contemporaries, he gazed steadily at the horizon, and his thoughts were as distant as his eyes. After each visit to the 146 church he returned home with a depressed spirit, for the teachings of the priests were different from the precepts he found in the gospel, and the life of the faithful was not the beautiful life of which Christ spoke. Spring came and the snow melted in the fields and valleys. The snow upon the mountain tops was thawing gradually and forming many streamlets in the winding paths leading into the valleys, combining into a torrent whose roaring bespoke the awakening of nature. The almond and apple trees were in full bloom, the willow and poplar trees were sprouting with buds, and nature had spread her happy and colorful garments over the countryside. John, tired of spending his days by the fireside, and knowing that his oxen were longing for the pastures, released his animals from the sheds and led them to the fields, concealing his New Testament under his cloak for fear of detection. He reached a beautiful arbor adjacent to some fields. 147. Belonging to the St. Elijah Monastery *, which stood majestically upon a nearby hill. As the oxen commenced grazing, John leaned upon a rock and began to read his New Testament and meditate. The sadness of the children of God on earth, and the beauty of the kingdom of heaven. It was the last day of Lent, and the villagers who abstained from eating meat were impatiently awaiting the coming of Easter. John, like the rest of the poor fellaheen, never distinguished Lent from any other day of the year, for his whole life was an extended Lent, and his food never exceeded the simple bread, kneaded with the pain of his heart, or the fruits, purchased with the blood of his body. The only nourishment craved by John during Lent was that spiritual food, the heavenly bread that brought into his heart sad thoughts of the tragedy of the Son of Man and the end of his life. Sea and earth. The birds were singing and hovering about him, and large flocks of doves circled in the sky. A rich abbey in North Lebanon with vast lands, occupied by scores of monks called Alpoans. Editor's note. 148. While the flowers swayed with the breeze as if exhilarated by the brilliant sunshine, John busied himself absorbing the book, and between these intense, light-giving sessions, he watched the domes of the churches in the nearby villages and listened to the rhythmic toll of the bells. Occasionally he would close his eyes and fly on the wings of dreams to Old Jerusalem, following Christ's steps and asking the people of the city about the Nazarene, whereupon he would receive the answer, here he cured the paralyzed and restored to the blind their sight, and there they braided for him a wreath of thorns and placed it upon his head. From that portico he spoke to the multitude with beautiful parables. In that palace they tied him to the marble columns and scourged him. On this road he forgave the adulteress her sins, and upon that spot he fell under the weight of his cross. 1 hour passed, and John was suffering physically with God and glorifying with him in spirit. 149. Noon quickly came, and the oxen were beyond the reach of John's sight. He looked in every direction, but could not see them, and as he reached the trail that led to the adjacent fields, he saw a man at a distance, standing amidst the orchards. As he approached and saw that the man was one of the monastery's monks, he greeted him, bowed reverently, and asked him if he had seen the oxen. The monk appeared to be restraining anger, and he said, "Yes, I saw them. Follow me and I will show them to you." As they reached the monastery, John found his oxen tied with ropes in a shed. One of the monks was acting as a watchman over them, and each time an animal moved, he struck the ox across the back with a heavy club. John made a frantic attempt to unbind the helpless animals, but the monk took hold of his cloak and withheld him. At the same time he turned toward the monastery and shouted, saying, "Here is the criminal shepherd. I have found him." The priests and monks, preceded by the head priest, hurried to the scene and encircled John, who was bewildered, and felt like a captive. "I have done 150 nothing to merit the treatment of a criminal," said John to the head priest. And the leader replied angrily, "Your oxen have ruined our plantation and destroyed our vineyards. Since you are responsible for the damage, we will not give up your oxen until you adjust our loss." John protested, "I am poor and have no money. Please release my oxen and I pledge my honor that I will never again bring them to these Jans." The head priest took a step forward, raised his hand toward heaven, and said, "God has appointed us to be the protectors over this vast land of St. Elijah, and it is our sacred duty to guard it with all of our might, for this land is holy, and, like fire, it will burn any who trespass upon it. If you refuse to account for your crime against God, the grass that your oxen have eaten will surely turn into poison and destroy them. The head priest started to depart, but John touched his robe and humbly begged, I appeal to you in the name of Jesus and all the saints, to let me and my animals free. Be kind to me, for I am poor, and the coffers of the monastery are 151. Bursting with silver and gold. Have mercy upon my poor and aged parents, whose lives depend on me. God will forgive me if I have harmed you. The head priest looked at him with severity, and said, Poor or rich, the monastery cannot forgive you your debts. 3 dinars will free your oxen. John pleaded, Do not possess a single coin, have mercy on a poor grazier, Father. And the head priest retorted, Then you must sell a part of your possessions and bring 3 dinars, for it is better to enter the kingdom of heaven without property than to bring the wrath of St. Elijah upon you and descend to hell. The other monks nodded their accord. After a short silence, John's face brightened, and his eyes shone as if fear and servility had deserted his heart. With his head high, he looked at the head priest and addressed him boldly, saying, Do the weak poor have to sell their pitiful belongings, the source of their life's bread, in order to add more gold to the monastery's wealth? Is it just that the poor should be oppressed and made poorer in order that St. Elijah may forgive? 152. The oxen their innocent wrongs. The head priest raised his eyes to heaven and intoned, It is writ 10 in the book of God that he who has plenty shall be given more, and he who has not shall be taken from. When John heard these words he became furious, and like a soldier who draws his sword in the face of the enemy, he drew the New Testament from his pocket and shouted out, This is how you twist the teachings of Christ, you hypocrite. And thus do you pervert the most sacred heritage of life in order to spread your evils. Woe to you when the Son of Man comes again and destroys your monastery and throws its debris in the valley, and burns your shrine and altars into ashes. Woe to you when the wrath of the Nazarene descends upon you and throws you into the depths of the abyss. Woe to you, worshippers of the idols of greed, who hide the ugliness of hatred under your black garments. Woe to you, foes of Jesus, who move your lips with prayers while your hearts are laden with lusts. Woe to you who kneel before the altar. 153. In body while your spirits are revolting against God. You are polluted with your own sin of punishing me for approaching your land, paid for by me and my ancestors. You ridiculed me when I asked for mercy in the name of Christ. Take this book and show your smiling monks where the Son of God ever refused to forgive. Read this heavenly tragedy and tell them where he spoke not of mercy and of kindness, be it in the Sermon of the Mount, or in the temple. Did he not forgive the adulteress her sins? Did he not part his hands upon the cross to embrace humanity? Look upon our wretched homes, where the sick suffer upon their hard beds. Look behind the prison bars, where the innocent man is victim of oppression and injustice. Look upon the beggars, stretching forth their hands for alms, humiliated in heart and broken in body. Think upon your slaving followers, who are suffering the pangs of hunger while you are living a life of luxury and indifference, and enjoying the fruits of the fields and the wine of the vineyards. You have never visited a sufferer nor consoled. 154. The downhearted nor fed the hungry, neither have you sheltered the wayfarer nor offered sympathy to the lame. Yet you are not satisfied with what you have pilfered from our fathers, but still stretch your hands like vipers' heads, grasping by threats of hell what little a widow has saved. Through body-breaking toil, or a miserable fellow has stored away to keep his children alive. John took a deep breath, then calmed his voice, and quietly added, You are numerous, and I am alone. You may do unto me what you wish. The wolves prey upon the lamb in the darkness of the night, but the blood stains remain upon the stones in the valley until the dawn comes, and the sun reveals the crime to all. There was a magic power in John's talk that arrested their attention and injected a defensive anger into the monks' hearts. They were shaking with fury and waiting only for their superiors' order to fall upon John and bring him to submission. The brief silence was like the heavy quiet of the tempest, after laying waste the gardens. The head priest then commanded the monks. 155. Saying, Bind this criminal and take the book from him and drag him into a dark cell, for he who blasphemes the holy representatives of God will never be forgiven on this earth, neither in eternity. The monks leaped upon John and led him manacled into a narrow prison and barred him there. The courage shown by John could not be perceived or understood by one who partakes of the submission or the deceit or the tyranny of this enslaved country, called by the Orientals the bride of Syria, and the pearl of the Sultan's crown. And in his cell, John thought of the needless misery brought upon his countrymen by the grip of the things he had just learned. He smiled with a sad sympathy, and his smile was mingled with suffering and bitterness, the kind that cuts its way through the depths of the heart, the kind that sets the soul to a choking futility, the kind which, if left unsupported, ascends to the eyes and falls down helplessly. John then stood proudly, and looked through the window slit facing the sunlit valley. He felt 156. As if a spiritual joy were embracing his soul and a sweet tranquility possessing his heart. They had imprisoned his body, but his spirit was sailing freely with the breeze amidst the knolls and prairies. His love for Jesus never changed, and the torturing hands could not remove his heart's ease. For persecution cannot harm him who stands by truth. Did not Socrates fall proudly a victim in body? Was not Paul stoned for the sake of the truth? It is our inner selves that hurt us when we disobey it, and it kills us when we betray it. John's parents were informed of his imprisonment and the confiscation of the oxen. His old mother came to the monastery leaning heavily over her walking stick, and she prostrated herself before the head priest, kissing his feet and begging him for mercy upon her only son. The head priest raised his head reverently toward heaven and said, We will forgive your son for his madness, but St. Elijah will not forgive any who pass upon his land. After gazing at him with 157 tearful eyes, the old lady took a silver locket from her neck and handed it to the head priest, saying, This is my most precious possession, given to me as a wedding gift by my mother. Will you accept it as atonement for my son's sin? The head priest took the locket and placed it in his pocket, whereupon he looked at John's ancient mother, who was kissing his hands and expressing to him her thanks and gratitude, and he said, Woe to this sinful age! You twist the saying of the good book and cause the children to eat the sour, and the parents' teeth sit on edge. Go now, good woman, and pray to God for your mad son and ask him to restore his mind. John left the prison, and walked quietly by the side of his mother, driving the oxen before him. When they reached their wretched hovel, he led the animals into their mangers and sat silently by the window, meditating the sunset. In a few moments he heard his father whispering to his mother, saying, "Sarah, many times have I told you that John was mad, and you disbelieved. Now you will agree, after what you have seen, for the 158th head priest has spoken to you today the very words I spoke to you in past years." John continued, looking toward the distant horizon, watching the sun descend. Easter arrived, and at that time the construction of a new church in the town of Bsheri had just been completed. This magnificent place of worship was like a prince's palace standing amidst the huts of poor subjects. The people were scurrying through the many preparations to receive a prelate who was assigned to officiate at the religious ceremonies inaugurating the new temple. The multitude stood in rows over the roads waiting for his grace's arrival. The chanting of the priests in unison with cymbal sounds and the hymns of the throngs filled the sky. The prelate finally arrived, riding a magnificent horse harnessed with a gold-studded saddle, and as he dismounted, the priests and political leaders met him with the most beautiful of welcoming speeches. He was escorted to the new altar, where 159. He clothed himself in ecclesiastical raiment, daco, braided with gold threads and encrusted with sparkling gems. He wore the golden crown, and walked in a procession around the altar, carrying his jeweled staff. He was followed by the priests and the carriers of tapers and incense burners. At that hour, John stood amongst the fellaheen at the portico, contemplating the scene with bitter sighs and sorrowful eyes, for it pained him to serve the expensive robes, and precious crown, and staff, and vases, and other objects of needless extravagance, while the poor fellaheen who came from the surrounding villages to celebrate the occasion were suffering the gnawing pangs of poverty. Their tattered swaddles and sorrowful faces bespoke their miserable plight. The rich dignitaries, decorated with badges and ribbons, stood aloof praying loudly, while the suffering villagers, in the rear of the scene, beat their bosoms in sincere prayer that came from the depths of their broken hearts. The authority of those dignitaries and leaders, 160, was like the evergreen leaves of the poplar trees. And the life of those fellaheen was like a boat whose pilot had met his destiny and whose rudder had been lost and whose sails had been torn by the strong wind and left at the mercy of the furious depths and the raging tempest. Tyranny and blind submission. Which one of these gave birth to the other? Is tyranny a strong tree that grows not in the low earth, or is it submission, which is like a deserted field, where naught but thorns can grow? Such thoughts and contemplations preyed on John's mind while the ceremonies were taking place. He braced his arms about his chest for fear his bosom would burst with agony over the people's plight. In this tragedy of opposites, he gazed upon the withering creatures of severe humanity, whose hearts were dry and whose seeds were now seeking shelter in the bosom of the earth, as destitute pilgrims seek rebirth in a new realm. When the pageantry came to an end and the multitude was preparing to disperse, John felt that 161. A compelling power was urging him to speak in behalf of the oppressed poor. He proceeded to an extreme end of the square, raised his hands toward the sky, and as the throngs gathered about, he opened his lips and said, O Jesus, who art sitting in the heart of the circle of light, give heed. Look upon this earth from behind the blue dome, and see how the thorns have choked the flowers, which thy truth hast planted. O good shepherd, the wolves have preyed upon the weak lamb which thou hast carried in thy arms. Thy pure blood has been drawn into the depths of the earth which thy feet have made sacred. This good earth has been made by thine enemies into an arena where the strong crushes the weak. The cry of the miserable and the lamentation of the helpless can no longer be heard by those sitting upon the thrones, preaching thy word. The lambs which thou hast sent to this earth are now wolves who eat the one which thou hast carried and blessed. The word of light which sprang forth from thy heart has vanished from the scripture and is 162. Replaced with an empty and terrible uproar that frightens the spirit. O Jesus, they have built these churches for the sake of their own glory, and embellished them with silk and melted gold. They left the bodies of thy chosen poor wrapped in tattered raiment in the cold night. They filled the sky with the smoke of burning candles and incense, and left the bodies of thy faithful worship purse empty of bread. They raised their voices with hymns of praise, but deafened themselves to the cry and moan of the widows and orphans. Come again, O living Jesus, and drive the vendors of thy faith from thy sacred temple. For they have turned it into a dark cave where vipers of hypocrisy and falsehood crawl and abound. John's words, strong and sincere, brought murmurs of approval, and the approach of the dignitaries quelled him not. With added courage, strengthened by memories of his earlier experience, he continued, Come, O Jesus, and render ac counts with those Caesars who usurped from the 163. Weak, what is the weak's, and from God what is God's? The grapevine which thou hast planted with thy right hand has been eaten by worms of greed, and its bunches have been trampled down. Thy sons of peace are dividing amongst themselves and fighting one with another, leaving poor souls as victims in the wintry field. Before thy altar, they raise their voices with prayers, saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. Will our Father in heaven be glorified when his name is uttered by empty hearts and sinful lips and false tongues? Will peace be on earth while the sons of misery are slaving in the fields to feed the strong and fill the stomachs of the tyrants? Will ever peace come and save them from the clutches of destitution? What is peace? Is it in the eyes of those infants, nursing upon the dry breasts of their hungry mothers in cold huts? Or is it in the wretched hovels of the hungry who sleep upon hard beds, and crave for one bite of the food which the priests and monks feed to their fat pigs? What is joy, O beautiful Jesus? Is it manifest? 164. When the Emir buys the strong arms of men and the honor of women for threats of death or for a few pieces of silver? Or is it found in submiss Zion, and slaving of body and spirit to those who dazzle our eyes with their glittering badges and golden diadems? Upon each complaint to thy peacemakers, they reward us with their soldiers, armed with swords and spears to step upon our women and children and steal our blood. O Jesus, full of love and mercy, stretch forth thy strong arms and protect us from those thieves. Or send welcome death to deliver us and lead us to the graves where we can rest peacefully under The watchful care of thy cross, there we shall wait for thy return. O mighty Jesus, this life is naught but a dark cell of enslavement. It is a playing ground of horrible ghosts, and it is a pit alive with spectres of death. Our days are but sharp swords concealed under the ragged quilts of our beds in the fearful darkness of the night. At dawn, these weapons rise above our heads as demons, pointing out to us our whip-driven slavery in the fields. 165. O Jesus, have mercy upon the oppressed poor, who came today to commemorate thy resurrection. Pity them, for they are miserable and weak. John's talk appealed to one group and displeased another. He is telling the truth, and speaking in our behalf before heaven, one remarked. And another one said, he is bewitched, for he speaks in the name of an evil spirit. And a third commented, we have never heard such infamous talk, not even from our fathers. We must bring it to an end. And a fourth one said, whispering into the next man's ears, T felt a new spirit in me when I heard him talking. The next man added, but the priests know our needs more. So then he does, it is a sin to doubt them. As the voices grew from every direction like the roar of the sea, one of the priests approached, placed John in restraint and turned him immediately to the law, whereupon he was taken to the governor's palace for trial. Upon his interrogation, John uttered not a single word, for he knew that the Nazarene 166 sorted to silence before his persecutors. The governor ordered John to be placed in a prison, where he slept peacefully and heart-cleansed that night, leaning his head on the rock wall of the dungeon. The next day John's father came and testified before the governor that his son was mad, and added, sadly, many times have I heard him talking to himself and speaking of many strange things that none could see or understand. Many times did he sit talking in the silence of the night, using vague words. I heard him calling the ghosts with a voice like that of a sorcerer. You may ask the neighbors who talked to him and found beyond doubt that he was insane. He never swore when one spoke to him, and when he spoke, he uttered cryptic words and phrases unknown to the listener and out of the subject. His mother knows him well. Many times she saw him gazing at the distant horizon with glazed eyes, and speaking with passion, like a small child, about the brooks and the flowers and the stars. Ask the monks whose teachings he ridiculed and criticized during their sacred Lent. He is insane. 167. Your Excellency, but he is very kind to me and to his mother, he does much to help us in our old age, and he works with diligence to keep us fed and warm and alive. Pity him, and have mercy on us. The governor released John, and the news of his madness spread throughout the village. And when the people spoke of John they mentioned his name with humor and ridicule, and the maidens looked upon him with sorrowful eyes, and said, Heaven has its strange purpose in man. God united beauty and insanity in this youth, and joined the kind brightness of his eyes with the darkness of his unseen self. Asterisk 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 asterisk. In the midst of God's fields and prairies, and by the side of the knolls, carpeted with green grass and beautiful flowers, the ghost of John, alone and restless, watches the oxen grazing peacefully, undisturbed by man's hardships. With tear-full eyes he looks toward the scattered villages on both sides of the valley and repeats with deep 168. Sighs, you are numerous and I am alone, the wolves prey upon the lambs in the darkness of the night, but the blood stains remain upon the stones. In the valley until the dawn comes, and the sun reveals the crime to all.